Chapter 2235. Hua Jin's smile had a special kind of charm. There was a special kind of enchanting mist in his eyes. Usually, Yin Shishir rarely saw him show much sincerity in his smile. In front of the camera, he smiled modestly and hypocritically. On the surface, he looked like a humble teenager. However, when the camera turned, in the blink of an eye, the contempt and boredom in the corner of his eyes made that smile look especially ironic. In the crew, his smile became arrogant and insufferably arrogant, like a little demon king, like a rebellious child. Whether it was the director, the actors, or even the extras, he seemed to be deliberately angering them. He spoke ill of them until they were sad, and then he showed an expression of success. But immediately, another kind of indescribable sense of loss and loneliness would appear in his eyes. This kind of loneliness, like an isolated child, tried to use the worst way to attract anyone's attention, to get other people's care and flattery, even if it was hypocritical. But at this moment, when Yin Shishir turned her head and looked at Hua Jin, she saw him looking at the night sky. His eyes were like hidden stars, bright and shining. This seemed to be his true appearance. Naive, innocent, and simple like a child who didn't know anything about the world. There was no longer a sharp edge on him, and he was so white that he was not stained with any dazzling colors. He said, "I also hope that I am Shishir's child." It sounded like a very normal thing to say. But from his tone, Yin Shishir could hear a bit of helplessness and yearning. This kind of helplessness and yearning made her heart ache inexplicably. She had never been a person who was overflowing with love. She hated those cliches and hypocrisy. But her love for Hua Jin, under Hua Jin's smiling gaze, the pain in her heart suddenly overflowed and overflowed. She couldn't help but hold his hand tightly. She just wanted to give him as much warmth as possible on such a cold night. A trace of insignificant warmth. Yin Shishir looked up at the sky. At this time, there were already people who couldn't hold back their excitement and lit up the fireworks in advance. She couldn't help but think of her childhood. She still remembered the first New Year she spent with the Yun family. She still remembered that Yun Yeqing had specially bought a lot of fireworks to set off that year. Some of them were very expensive, easily costing a few hundred yuan. There were even some big and beautiful ones that cost a few thousand yuan. Ordinary families would not bear to set them off. Usually, only those who were slightly wealthier would buy them. At that time, the Yun family was still very wealthy, and Yun Yeqing's career was at its peak. Hence, the fireworks he bought were the most beautiful ones. The New Year's Eve of more than 10 years ago was not like it was now. The streets and alleys were brimming with a strong festive atmosphere. Setting off fireworks was one of the most anticipated New Year's activities. The beauty and splendor of fireworks was the dream of many children. On New Year's Eve, Yin Na pestered Yun Yeqing to set off fireworks. Alas, Yun Yeqing insisted on releasing it on New Year's Eve. That night, Yin Na secretly moved a set of fireworks from home. She dragged Yin Shishir out and asked her to show it to her. Chapter 2236. When she heard that, she nodded fearfully and took a match to light it. However, due to her lack of experience, the fuse was not completely lit and was blown out by the wind. Only a small part of the fuse was left. Yin Na scolded her and asked her to continue lighting it. Yin Shishir braced herself and went forward to take a look. Then, she tried to light it with a lighter in fear. However, the fireworks that suddenly shot up into the sky almost blew up her eyes. Because of this, it left a huge shadow in her heart. Since then, she only dared to set off simple fireworks, such as firework sticks and sparks. Thinking of this, Yin Shishir could not help but laugh. She suddenly asked, "Hua Jin, did you set off fireworks when you were young?" "Yeah, I did." Hua Jin nodded and then said, "However, I rarely had the chance to go out to play during the New Year. Most of the time, I could only lie on the balcony and watch other people set off fireworks. I'm still a little traumatized by fireworks." "What's wrong?" "Because when I set off fireworks when I was young, it almost blew up my eyes." Yin Shishir paused and suddenly said, half-jokingly, "So, from then on, I didn't dare to set off large fireworks because I was afraid that it would blow up my eyes." Hua Jin suddenly turned his head and looked at her. He blinked and said, "Actually, setting off fireworks is not scary. Just be careful and it'll be fine." Yin Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. She said, "Even though that's what I think, I'm still scared." Hua Jin suddenly held her hand. "Don't be scared. If you accidentally get blown up, you still have me." Yin Shishir did not understand the meaning behind his words. Hua Jin suddenly said seriously, "Yeah, if you can't see, I'll be your eyes." If she could not see, he would be her eyes. Yin Shishir was stunned for a moment. She widened her eyes slightly and then smiled gently. "Okay, but there won't be such a day." At that time, Yin Shishir only took his words as a joke. However, after a long time, when she suddenly recalled that year's New Year's Eve and Hua Jin's serious promise, she couldn't help but sigh. It turned out that every word he said to her was sincere from the bottom of his heart. However, this was all in the future. 11:55 p.m. At this moment, countless citizens had gathered by the river. Many people gathered here to welcome the New Year's bell. Some brought the elderly and children with them in high spirits. Some brought young and loving couples. Their only purpose was to welcome the gorgeous fireworks at the moment the New Year's bell rang. Gong Jie raised his wrist and looked at his watch. As the countdown approached, his handsome face showed a bit of excitement and expectation. "Sis, it's almost 12. When Xiao Qin and Yu heard this, they looked at each other and smiled. Both of them were jumping up and down excitedly. Yin Shishir smiled and said, "Who's going to be in charge of lighting the fireworks later? I rarely light fireworks. I don't know much about it." Just as Gong Jie finished speaking, Xiao Qin raised his hand enthusiastically. "I'll do it. I'll light it." However, Yu said softly, "Hey, it's too dangerous. You're so clumsy. Be careful not to get hurt by the explosion." This reminder was a form of concern in disguise. Chapter 22:37. It was just fireworks. He was not afraid of that. In fact, he was looking forward to lighting the fireworks himself. That was because lighting the fireworks himself and sending them into the night sky would give him a great sense of accomplishment. Moreover, it was just fireworks. He had even played with rocket launchers before. So to him, fireworks were nothing more than an interesting toy. It was not a problem at all. Yu raised his eyebrows and suddenly realized that Mui Qin was not comparable to those ordinary kids. He had seen his abilities and knew that he was crazy. Lighting fireworks was nothing to him. "All right, you're in charge of lighting the fireworks. We'll be in charge of watching." Yu was relieved, but he still reminded him cautiously. "However, you still have to be careful. The power of the fireworks is not to be underestimated, okay?" "I know." Xiao Qin was not grateful at all. He nagged, "Why are you acting like a busybody?" Yu was unhappy when he heard that. He said coldly, "Humph. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. If you hurt yourself later, don't cry for your parents. I won't feel bad for you." Then, Yu ran proudly to Yin Shishir's side. He hugged Yin Shishir's arm and waited for the countdown to start. 11:59 p.m. The last minute. Suddenly, the townsfolk gathered by the riverside and started counting down in unison. 10, 9, 8, 7, Xiao Qin shouted excitedly. "Daddy, it's time to light the fireworks." Muyaja leaned against the railing by the riverside. When he heard the commotion, his lips curled into a smile. He casually picked up a cigarette from his lips and walked over. He rubbed Xiao Qin's head and passed him the cigarette. Xiao Qin took the cigarette and chased him to the side. "Daddy, be careful." Muyaja walked to Yin Shishir's side. He reached out and gently hugged Yu in his arms. His other hand gently hugged Yin Shishir's shoulder. 3-1. Walala. At the moment when midnight arrived, countless fireworks rose into the sky, as if there was some kind of magical tacit understanding. In the dark night sky, dazzling sparks exploded one after another. Xiao Qin covered his ears and ran back. Behind him, fireworks lit up half of the starry sky. More and more people gathered by the river. Xiao Qin tiptoed and could not see clearly. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out from behind. Gong Jie picked up Xiao Qin and placed him on his shoulder, supporting him firmly with one hand. Can you see it clearly now? Yes, I can see it clearly. Gong Jie smiled and then muttered unhappily, Kid, you're quite heavy. Xiao Yiqin, on the other hand, was sitting on his left shoulder with a clear conscience. She held his arm and excitedly watched the countless fireworks rising from the riverside. Ba. Yin Shishir was engrossed in watching the fireworks. Mu Yaja suddenly pulled her into his arms, nodded, and kissed her forehead affectionately. Madam, Happy New Year. Yin Shishir's heart skipped a beat because of this sudden tenderness. She looked up and met Mu Yaja's gentle eyes. Her face blushed, and her eyes revealed a seductive look. Yin Shishir responded with an but Mu Yaja suddenly lowered his head and kissed her lips uncontrollably. Chapter 22:38. Yu caught a glimpse of this intimate scene and blushed. She covered her eyes shyly and forced herself not to look. See no evil, hear no evil. Even though she kept telling herself not to look, the little fellow couldn't resist her curiosity. She secretly opened her fingers and peeked at this tender scene through her fingers. Xiao Yiqin also caught a glimpse of this scene and suddenly tugged at Gong Jie's hair excitedly. Uncle, look! Gong Jie hissed in pain, but when he looked in the direction little Yiqin was pointing, he saw a heart-pounding scene. His handsome brows knitted together in a frown. He walked over unhappily. Just as Mu Yaja was about to kiss her again, Gong Jie boldly reached out and blocked their faces. Mu Yaja was caught off guard and a kiss landed on Gong Jie's palm. Ha ha ha! Yu burst into laughter when she saw this. Mu Yaja suddenly looked up and glared fiercely at Gong Jie. He said coldly, What are you doing? Hey, we're in public. Why can't brother-in-law take note of his image? Gong Jie mocked him with hostility. How dare he secretly kiss his sister when he wasn't paying attention? If the two of them were being intimate, they should at least avoid a sister-con like him. Why don't you consider my feelings? Yin Shishir was so embarrassed that her neck turned red when she heard this. She turned her head away awkwardly, cleared her throat, and pretended that nothing had happened. What image? Mu Yaja said confidently. I'm kissing my wife. It's none of your business. It was a simple sentence, but it left Gong Jie speechless. Yu laughed dauntlessly and almost fell off Mu Yaja's shoulder. Mu Yaja smacked him on the buttocks. Behave yourself. Xiao Yiqin pouted and complained, Daddy, that's not right. Shouldn't the first kiss of a new year be given to your precious son? If you give mommy a kiss, what about me? I want a kiss too. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a smile. All right. As he spoke, Mu Yaja suddenly leaned forward slightly and reached out his hand. His slender hand gently lifted Xiao Yiqin's chin. He tilted his head slightly and gently kissed the corner of Xiao Yiqin's lips. Boom! A loud sound rang out. Little Yiqin's face was so red that it looked as if blood was about to drip from it. He had only said it casually, but this stupid daddy of his actually took it seriously. He even gave him such a kiss. His every move was bewitching and charming. He was even more bewitching than those male gods in idol dramas. Especially the smile in his eyes. It killed everything in an instant. Have you ever seen a father flirt with his son? Have you? Little Yiqin let out a yelp as he jumped down from his uncle's lap. Covering his face with his hands, he ran away shyly. You're so annoying. Daddy is flirting with me. Mu Yaja was silent. Yin Shishir was so amused that she burst into laughter. She laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. Xiao Yiqin was such a clown. Did the heavens send him here to make fun of her? Gong Jie felt even more indignant when he saw her laugh. He snorted coldly. Sister, you're so biased. You give brother-in-law a kiss and not me a kiss. You're not a child anymore, Yin Shishir said, feeling speechless. Gong Jie said coquettishly, No, sister. To be fair, hurry up and kiss me. As he spoke, he closed his eyes and moved his fair face closer. He tapped his face with his finger and said, Kiss here. Chapter 22:39. Yin Shishir's antennae twitched violently. However, in the next second, Mu Yaja turned Gong Jie's face and grabbed his chin. Then, he leaned over and gave him a peck on the cheek. When Gong Jie came back to his senses, he opened his eyes. When he saw the culprit in front of him, he instantly jumped up and rubbed his cheek in disgust. He said angrily, "What are you doing?" Mu Yaja smiled mischievously and said provocatively, "Brother-in-law, are you satisfied with this kiss?" "You!" Gong Jie flew into a rage out of humiliation and spat, "Pervert." Then he threw a punch at his face. Mu Yaja dodged it nimbly and said scornfully, "You can't hit me." When Yu saw that Gong Jie was really angry, she quickly grabbed Mu Yaja's hand and ran away with her father. "Daddy, run. Uncle is going to beat you up." "Pervert. Stop right there. Don't run." Gong Jie waved his fist and chased after him. Behind him, Yin Shishir and Hua Jin were left in a mess. They stood there dumbfounded and only reacted after a while. They held their stomachs and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. By the river, the fireworks set off the night scene, which was mesmerizing and beautiful. When they returned home after setting off the fireworks, it was already past 2 o'clock in the morning. Hua Jin originally wanted to go home early, but Yin Shishir said that they wanted to stay up for the new year tonight, so they could stay up together. After returning home, the two little fellows were naturally exhausted after such a commotion. However, Gong Jie and Mu Yaja were still energetic. Even after messing around for a while, they still looked energetic. Thus, Yin Shishir was dragged by the two men to play cards. Hua Jin naturally joined them. After a few rounds of warm-ups, they had a good grasp of each other's abilities. Of course, some of them still held back. Xiao Yiqin was already asleep, but when Yu lay on the bed, she was wide awake and couldn't sleep. She heard the noise in the living room and walked out curiously. When she saw that they were playing Fight the Landlord, she wanted to join them. However, how could 5 people play Fight the Landlord? Hua Jin suddenly said, "Fight the landlord with 5 people. Fight the landlord." The rules were that after the cards were dealt, the landlord who had a card would play a card suit and draw a card. There were 2 decks of cards of each suit. On the other hand, the dark landlord, who had another suit, remained calm and collected. After confirming the identities of his teammates, he hid himself as a farmer and played the game silently, secretly helping the landlord's side to win. After sizing up everyone, the other 4 expressed that they did not have any objections. And the loser. If there's no punishment, it's a little boring. This time, it was Yin Shishir's turn to frown. "How about we don't have to pay? It's the new year and I'm broke. I can't afford to lose." The 4 of them looked at her with disdain. Yu was speechless. "Mommy, why do you sound like you're sure that you'll lose?" "Because I feel like we're not evenly matched. No matter how I look at it, the 4 of you look like seasoned casinos. I'm a newbie. If we really have to pay, I'll go bankrupt." Hua Jin, Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Yu were confused. Seasoned casinos? Yu comforted her. "It's okay. I'm worse. I'll be your scapegoat." Chapter 2240. Gong Jie suddenly said evilly, "The loser will have to carry Yu once." Yu is unjustly implicated. He was unhappy and threw his cards. "Hey, uncle, are you punishing the loser or me?" Smiley face, angle, Gong Jie whistled. "Then the loser will have to take off his clothes." Mu Yaja looked at him coldly. "Okay, what was there to be embarrassed about?" Anyway, the heater was on in the living room. Yu was speechless. Anyway, other than mommy, everyone here is a man. Daddy is not embarrassed. Gong Jie smiled sinisterly. "It's not that simple. After taking off your clothes, you had to run naked outside the door." Everyone was silent. How much hatred! That was too cruel. Outside the window, it started to snow again. It was extremely cold. Mu Yaja threw his cards directly at his face. "Since you like to run naked so much, do it yourself." Gong Jie was speechless. Hua Jin burst out laughing. Gong Jie suddenly looked over with a cold gaze. Everyone suddenly felt a gust of icy wind from Siberia. It was bone-chilling. Gong Jie suddenly said, "How about this? Whoever loses will jump down from the 2nd floor of the villa." Yin Shishir flicked his forehead. "It's just a game of cards. Do you want to risk your life?" Hua Jin suddenly felt that this man was very scary. Gong Jie was hit by Yin Shishir and said sadly, "This is how we play cards. Yin Shir said, "You're not human. We don't want to compete with you." Gong Jie said, "Sister, we came from the same womb. I'm not human. Are you a genetic mutant?" Yu laughed loudly. "That's right, Mommy. At least I came from your womb. If you're a genetic mutant, then what am I?" Yin Shir complained. "Both of you are not human." Yu was speechless. Gong Jie said, "Personal attacks are prohibited." Hua Jin suddenly suggested, "How about a dare?" When the four of them heard this, they had no objections. The first round began. Gong Jie shuffled the cards smoothly and skillfully. It was obvious that he had been in the casino before. Yin Shir was surprised to find that her younger brother, who couldn't even play cards properly when he was young, had learned to play cards very well after traveling abroad for more than 10 years. His action of cutting the cards was clean and neat. It seemed that he had practiced it before. There was a landlord in the light and a landlord in the dark. The open landlord who got the landlord card chose a pair of the same suit and called the dark landlord. The dark landlord hid among the other four people and secretly cooperated, which was the so-called traitor, and cooperated with the open landlord to achieve the final victory. In the first round, the landlord fell to Gong Jie. Gong Jie proudly called out, "Hidden landlord." Out of the corner of his eye, he sized up the other four people's expressions. All of them were veteran actors, and their expressions did not change at all. Gong Jie's cards were very good. Soon, there was only a single card left. The other four people were eyeing him covetously. As the next player, Yin Shir sealed her cards tightly. However, the most interesting thing about the open landlord card and the dark landlord card was that other than the open landlord card, the other four people did not know who the open landlord card was. Yin Shir was about to win, but Hua Jin, this pig of a teammate, made her stay at home. Seeing that there were no more cards left, the open landlord card appeared. The open landlord card quickly appeared. Yu, who was at the top of the Gong Jie card, played a trump card and secretly played Gong Jie's card. The open landlord card won the game. Yin Shir was speechless. She looked at Yu and said gloomily, "No way. All four trump cards are in your hands. Shao Jie, you didn't cheat when you dealt the cards, did you?" Chapter 22:41. Hence, Yin Shir was very suspicious. Gong Jie looked very hurt. "Sister, you have to accept your loss. Don't go back on your word after losing. Whoever cheats will have their hands chopped off." Hua Jin said, "It's so bloody. It's just a game of cards. How scary. You have to accept your loss." Mu Yaja threw the cards and glanced at Gong Jie. "Whoever wins gets to make a request." Hua Jin and Yin Shir looked at Gong Jie and Yu's sinister faces and wished they could hug each other and chant the great compassion mantra. Gong Jie, on the other hand, flashed a dazzling smile as he pointed at Hua Jin and Mu Yaja flirtatiously. "Both of you go and do 10 push-ups." Yin Shir pointed at herself curiously. "What about me?" Gong Jie said gently, "Sister, how can I bear to punish you? You can sit on brother-in-law's back." Yin Shir was speechless. Mu Yaja had to complete 10 push-ups, and Gong Jie wanted her to sit on Mu Yaja's back. Wouldn't that kill her? Although she wasn't fat, because of her height, she still had some weight. Mu Yaja's eyes turned cold, and he smiled casually. "Okay." With that, he stood up and casually unbuttoned his shirt sleeves and collar. "Madam, come on up." Yin Shir's heart was pounding. She couldn't bear it and glanced at Gong Jie and Yu who were watching the show. "Shao Jie, isn't this too cruel? How can it be?" Gong Jie said gloatingly, "Brother-in-law is so good. It's just 10 push-ups. He can definitely do it." Mu Yaja was speechless. Pervert. He was obviously going to torture him. He would remember this debt. Hua Jin was the first to finish 10 push-ups before returning to his position. Only then did Yin Shir stand up hesitantly and walked to Mu Yaja's side. She carefully sat down and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Mu Yaja was just about to start when Gong Jie suddenly said viciously, "Sister, you're breaking the rules. Your feet can't touch the ground. You have to be completely off the ground." Everyone, his feet were completely off the ground? In that case, wouldn't all her weight be on him? Could he take it? Mu Yaja was so angry that he laughed. "Fine." Yin Shir tried to lift her feet off the ground and sat on it. Muyaja's expression changed slightly and sank. Fortunately, when he was serving in the military, he had also completed weight push-ups training. At that time, the intensity of the training was definitely much higher than this. But after all, he had been away from the military for a long time. Usually, he paid attention to training and did not undergo such high-intensity training. Brother-in-law, get ready to start. 10 push-ups, go for it. Yu cheered him on from the side. Daddy, go for it. Muyaja started to do push-ups. 1, 2. Yu counted nervously. The first 5 push-ups were done smoothly. But when it came to the 6th, the speed slowed down. Every time he went down and got up, Muyaja's expression would change again and again. His posture was extremely accurate, but even though it took a lot of effort, he still managed to complete a set of 10 push-ups with difficulty. When he was done, Muyaja got up. His expression was rather ugly. He returned to his seat aggressively and took the initiative to shuffle the cards. Chapter 22:42. He skillfully cut the cards and let Gong Jie pour the cards. Then, he stacked them on the table and said coldly, "Pick your own cards." It was obvious that he was suspecting Gong Jie of cheating. Yin Shishir had suspected that Gong Jie was cheating, but she was just joking. She was not serious at all. Muyaja clearly felt that the cards were not as simple as just luck. He must have cheated. When he observed carefully earlier, he felt that there was something fishy about his technique. Therefore, he was suspicious. In fact, Gong Jie often played in casinos, so his technique was extremely nimble. His skill was second to none. He could not be any better at poker. Gong Jie's dynamic vision was extremely good. It could be said that he was on par with Xiao Yichen. The moment he shuffled the cards, he remembered the suit and the order of the cards in the blink of an eye. Then, he shuffled the cards and rearranged the suits. Then, he naturally distributed the good cards to his teammates. It seemed like a coincidence that Gong Jie secretly remembered all the suits in Yu Yu's pile of cards. Then, he deliberately called out to him. Yu Yu obviously saw it too, but he tacitly pretended not to know. However, Muyaja was also an experienced player. At first, when Gong Jie dealt the cards, he did not pay much attention. If he had been more alert and vigilant from the start, Gong Jie would not have had the chance to cheat. Gong Jie did not feel guilty. So what if he found out that he was cheating? If he did not catch him red-handed, it did not count. However, since he had been more vigilant, he could not cheat anymore. However, with his ability, it was not difficult for him to not cheat. He could not lose. Who knew what Muyaja would do to him if he lost? Earlier, he had only asked Muyaja to do a set of weighted push-ups to satisfy his appetite. Yet, he was already so serious. If he lost, he didn't know what kind of torture this old fox would come up with. Thus, when the second round began, everyone began to prepare. This was especially true for Huajin. He was only here for the fun of it. He didn't want to be dragged into this storm of war between brother-in-law and brother-in-law and be reduced to cannon fodder. Yin Shishir was even more frightened. Her mind was filled with the scene of Muyaja carrying her on his back and doing push-ups. If she lost, she wouldn't even be able to get up, let alone a set. She could only think that no matter who she teamed up with, she could not become a burden. As soon as the match started, Gong Jie and Muyaja's aura changed completely. They were full of vigor, as if they were ready to kill Buddha. However, Yi was not nervous. After all, he was neutral. He did not want to offend either side. Thus, no matter who won, he was not worried at all about being the target of revenge. In the second round, the open landlord was Huajin. Huajin had been picking and choosing. He had 2 big and small trump cards. He thought that since he was playing the landlord, he had to find a strong teammate. Thus, when he played a big trump card, the other person with a big trump card became the hidden landlord. He thought that if his teammate also had a trump card, the situation would be much better. His cards were not very smooth. Thus, in this round, he was on tenterhooks from the start. He could only hope that his teammate who was hiding in the dark would do a better job. Chapter 22:43. However, the other drawback was that everyone knew that Huajin had a trump card. They would take this opportunity to raise their guard and not play a single card, which would put them at risk. Huajin glanced at the people in the room and saw that the other 4 people had different expressions. He could not tell which one was his teammate. Yun Shir kept observing the situation. It was obvious that she was not the hidden landlord. Yu, on the other hand, looked indifferent. He held the card in one hand and rested his chin on the other. His gaze was lazy. It was obvious that it was not him either. Muyaja and Gong Jie looked at each other with hostility. As the two most powerful people in the room, the two of them happened to be sitting on opposite sides. At that moment, the two of them were glaring at each other. Their gazes collided and sparks flew. Before the game started, it was necessary to observe the opponent. The foreplay had to be done. Soon, the hidden landlord came to the surface. Gong Jie played a trump card and blocked Yu's small king. He was proud, as if he was very confident. Since he was willing to reveal his identity as the hidden landlord, he was very confident that he would win the game. He had always been like this. He would not make a meaningless struggle. If there was a chance of winning, he would take it down with irresistible force. Gong Jie's cards were very smooth. Hua Jin cooperated with him and killed all the way. Big plain. Gong Jie only had a single card left in his hand. At that moment, there were not many cards left in the farmer's hand. Gong Jie calculated that there were probably no guns left in the room. However, at this critical moment, Muyaja came out. Hua Jin saw that he had killed a Chung Yao Jin at this critical moment. He did not hesitate to contribute the bomb in his hand. 5 6s was a very big bomb. No one could blow it up. However, the tragedy was that Hua Jin was not in Gong Jie's house. He could not put down his card. His next house was Yu. He played a single card to test the waters. There was no trump card left on the field. Yu made Hua Jin fall into despair. Gong Jie only had one card in his hand. As long as he didn't play a single card, he was basically unstoppable. Soon, Yu played a pair of 44-4s and placed Muyaja's cards on the table. Hua Jin received no more cards that could suppress him, and Gong Jie's cards were all alone. They posed no threat to him. Muyaja quickly threw out all the cards in his hand. The last card fluttered onto the table. Muyaja crossed his arms over his chest and arrogantly raised his chin. A sinister smile appeared on his face. It was as if he was silently brewing some perverted game. Gong Jie's face darkened and turned ashen. He looked at Muyaja, who was constantly sizing him up. His expression changed again and again. It was over. It fell into his hands. Gong Jie gritted his teeth and said angrily, "This man's gaze was perverted no matter how he looked at it. He did not know what tricks he was going to play." Hua Jin's eyes widened in shock. He did not expect this round to end like this. He had lost. The problem was that there was Gong Jie in his camp. The final punishment was destined to be a bloodbath. He had just done a set of push-ups. Fortunately, he had avoided a calamity. This time, would he be implicated in a perverted game like Gong Jie? In the end, his prophecy came true. Chapter 22:44. When Yu heard this, she covered her mouth and snickered. Suddenly, she nudged Yun Shir's shoulder and asked softly, "Mommy, Daddy said we're going to play a game. Guess what kind of perverted game it will be?" Yun Shir shook her head blankly and said, "I can't guess, but it must be very perverted." Hua Jin accidentally overheard Yun Shir's words. Even though her voice was very low, he could hear it clearly because they were sitting opposite each other. Corporal punishment. He supported corporal punishment. Hua Jin would rather do push-ups than play this man's game. It must be very perverted, right? Sure enough, his guess was confirmed. Muyaja quickly announced the rules of the game, the tissue game. There were a total of 10 tissues. They were neither thin nor thick. First, Hua Jin had to suck them up with his mouth. Then, using the same mouth-to-mouth method, Gong Jie had to suck them up to his own mouth. Then he would suck all the tissues and throw them into the trash can. Only then would it be considered a success. Wasn't this the same as a disguised mouth-to-mouth kiss? And it was two men. Gong Jie and Hua Jin looked at each other, both uncomfortable. Muyaja suddenly said casually, "Oh, if the tissues fall on the ground, there's a punishment too. However, if you use your mouth to suck the tissues up from the ground, then you can avoid the punishment. Do you understand the rules?" Dead silence. Gong Jie and Hua Jin's faces were extremely dark. Gong Jie's face was dark because he was extremely unhappy with the rules of the game. This was obviously teasing him. What tissue game? It was fine if it was only a woman, but the opponent was actually a man like Hua Jin. This was driving him crazy. Hua Jin's face was dark because he felt like he was the one who was implicated for no reason. It wasn't his first time kissing a man. Most importantly, he didn't dare to think about indirectly kissing a great demon king. What if he touched the big demon's red line and got swallowed whole? Yu Yu tried hard to hold back her laughter. Her shoulders were shaking as she tried to hold back her laughter. Tears were about to come out. Interesting. Uncle, come on. You said just now, too. Since you've lost, you have to accept the punishment. I prepared the props for you, too. Okay. Gong Jie glanced at the 10 tissues that Yu Yu had prepared for him. His lips for a while before he swallowed his anger and said, okay. He glanced coldly at Mu Yaja and sneered through gritted teeth. You win. With that, he pushed Hua Jin to the side and ordered begin. Yu 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 O O O Yu 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 and Yu 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 O O to Yu 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 and Yu Yu. The problem was that Gong Jie was taller than Hua Jin. Hence, Hua Jin had no choice but to stand on tiptoe, but the moment he lost his balance, he stumbled and nearly fell. But that wasn't the case. The tissue landed on the chair. Feeling depressed, the man rebuked. Can't you be more careful? Hua Jin muttered, who asked you to be so tall? Gong Jie's face darkened. Pick it up. Hua Jin's expression changed again. Then he bent down slowly and sucked the tissue into his mouth. Chapter 22:45. Gong Jie's broad palm held the back of the man's neck firmly as his thin lips pressed down on the ladders, sucking the tissue away with a suction force. Hua Jin was slightly taken aback by this gesture. Usually, this gesture was only used when a man was kissing a woman. Every detail showed the man's unique, domineering, and subtle gentleness. Just as he was stunned, Gong Jie had already moved closer to his lips. It was so cold. His lips were inexplicably cold. But Hua Jin's lips were very warm. The tissue was very thin, as if there was air between them. At the moment of contact, Hua Jin could almost clearly feel Gong Jie's soft and slightly cold lips. His breath blew against his face. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie sucked the tissue away from his mouth. Hua Jin was slightly stunned. His eyes widened, and his fingertips involuntarily caressed the lips that were still slightly warm. His face and ears were red, and his heart was beating like thunder. At this moment, Gong Jie had already turned around and walked briskly towards the trash can. He aimed at the trash can and gently threw the tissue into it. He deliberately bent down, afraid that if the angle was too high, the tissue would float elsewhere. The first one is a success. Yu Yu cheered him on. There are still 9 more. Uncle, you can do it. Gong Jie was speechless. Hua Jin was speechless. Both of their faces darkened, especially Hua Jin. He wanted to cry. What was this? He was innocent, okay? Yin Shishir covered her face helplessly. She was speechless. This game really hurts my eyes. Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only a black-bellied person like Daddy would come up with such a disgusting game. Little Munchkin's voice was very soft, but it was still heard by Mu Yaja. He flicked Little Munchkin's head and said unhappily, "Don't talk bad about Daddy." Wu, Gong Jie, and the other 2 followed the same process and completed the game one by one. In fact, this game was not difficult at all. The main reason was that the 2 men were kissing mouth to mouth in disguise, so it was inevitable that they would feel awkward and uncomfortable. This was especially true for Gong Jie, a typical straight man. This was his first time kissing a man. Although there was a piece of tissue between them, the tissue was so thin that it was basically non-existent. Through the tissue, he could still feel the shape of her lips and breath. Therefore, when the game was over, the 2 of them returned to their seats with a sour expression. In particular, Gong Jie's face was ashen and gloomy. Continue, Gong Jie said aggressively. When Yu Yu saw this, she couldn't help but open her pink lips and exclaim, "Wow, Uncle is so cool. His morale is off the charts. Oomph, I want revenge," Gong Jie vowed solemnly. Then, he shuffled and cut the cards. His movements were so swift that it was dazzling. It seemed that Uncle was starting to get serious. Yes, he had to be more careful. Otherwise, he would also become cannon fodder. In the third round, Gong Jie was the landlord again. Yu lamented, "Uncle, why do you keep getting the landlord? You're practically a professional landlord. We've only played 3 rounds, and you're already in the second round. Do you think I want to get the landlord?" Gong Jie snorted in annoyance. He obviously despised this luck. Chapter 2246. Yu continued, "It's not easy to play the landlord. I have a lot of bombs in my hand and 4 aces. Uncle, you're bound to lose." Gong Jie sneered, "You're bragging." Yu snorted and said, "Let's wait and see." Gong Jie was the first to play. It was a straight of 7 cards. However, Muyaja threw out an 8 in the next second and dominated the scene. He played the biggest card since it was a straight at the top. Unless it was a bomb, there was no other way. The moment Muyaja played his cards, he immediately ruled out the possibility of him being the landlord, who would block their own family's cards. Hence, no one could stop Muyaja from playing his cards. However, just as his cards were about to run out, Yu's sharp eyes spotted a card in the pile of cards that Muyaja played. A 9 of spades. This was the landlord card that Gong Jie had called out. He was the first to discover it. The others also discovered it one after another. "Daddy, you're the landlord?" When Yin Shirshir saw this card, she turned pale with fright. She had always thought that Muyaja was her teammate. Hence, when Muyaja played his cards, she did not have her guard up. In the end, she did not expect him to be the landlord. Gong Jie, on the other hand, was equally baffled and confused. "You're the secret landlord?" Muyaja admitted frankly and nodded. "Yeah." Gong Jie was immediately enraged. "Then why did you keep betting on my cards?" Muyaja casually said, "I just don't like you." Everyone was speechless. Gong Jie was once again confused. Yin Shirshir did not say another word. This time, she could not let Muyaja play his cards. She immediately blew up and sealed it. This time, the landlord's side was out of ammunition and food. Muyaja's hand was very smooth. Originally, he only had 1 bomb in his hand, but this bomb had already been used to bet on Gong Jie's hand. The 2 bombs in Gong Jie's hands also blew up Muyaja. Now, he had no more cards to play. Yu had a lot of cards in his hand. Initially, he thought that Daddy was his teammate, so he had been going easy on him. However, when he found out about Daddy's identity, he immediately started throwing his cards. Gong Jie and Muyaja stared at each other helplessly. They had no more cards to play. Yin Shirshir, Yu, and Hua Jin could be considered to have a tacit understanding of each other, so they won easily. Gong Jie threw down his cards and cried out gloomily, "This is an internal strife. He could have won. Brother-in-law, do you have any standpoint? Why are you betting on me when you have such good cards?" Muyaja said that famous phrase again, "I just don't like you." Gong Jie was furious. Yin Shirshir immediately became the peacemaker and mediated, no matter what, you've already lost. Both of you should accept your punishment obediently, right?" Yu clutched his stomach and laughed. Originally, he thought that Daddy was his teammate. This time, Uncle was going to lose again. He didn't expect the outcome to be reversed. Uncle had indeed lost, but Daddy had also lost. He laughed loudly. He was overjoyed. Gong Jie lost dejectedly. It was fine if he lost, but this time he felt very sullen. "How should we punish them?" Yu pursed his lips coldly. Gong Jie looked a little timid. This little guy was also a first-class black-bellied person. He didn't know what kind of rotten idea he would come up with this time. Hua Jin and Yin Shirshir, on the other hand, were calm and composed. "How about this, Uncle? You and Daddy will interlock our fingers until the end of the next round." Gong Jie widened his eyes in shock. "Are you kidding?" Chapter 2247. Muyaja glared at him coldly. "Don't mess around. You must accept your loss. You must accept your loss. Hurry up and hold hands. Otherwise, if you don't do as I say, I'll think of something more fun. Okay?" This was considered a threat. At the thought of Yu's little head, who knew what terrible punishment she was thinking of, Gong Jie and Muyaja looked at each other in disdain. Then, they gritted their teeth and reached out to each other. However, just as their hands touched each other's fingertips, Muyaja retracted his hand in disgust and said coldly, "How disgusting. Holding hands with a man gave them goosebumps. Gong Jie's lips twitched. Then he said coldly, "Brother-in-law, you still have the cheek to say that? If you weren't a hindrance, would you need to be punished?" Mu Yaja sneered. "Who told you to pick me as your teammate?" Gong Jie replied angrily, "If I knew that the 9 of spades was in your hands, I wouldn't have picked you even if I died." You couldn't stand it anymore. She urged, "Hurry up, don't waste time. Isn't it just holding hands? What's so difficult about that?" Mu Yaja and Gong Jie glared at him in unison. Their eyes were full of resentment. "Change the punishment," Gong Jie demanded righteously. Yu glanced at him calmly. Then she agreed readily. "Okay, then you can kiss." Gong Jie was speechless. Mu Yaja was speechless. Yin Shih covered her face. This guy was really two-faced. He actually made two men who didn't get along and were even incompatible like fire and water kiss each other. How cruel! What punishment could be worse than this? Gong Jie complained. Yu, are you trying to turn your daddy gay?" Mu Yaja coldly snorted, expressing his stance. Yu said, "With mommy around, daddy won't turn gay. Actually, I'm doing this because I hope that you can improve your relationship with each other and get along more harmoniously. Don't act like you're sworn enemies." "Harmony my ass. Harmony my ass. Forget it. Let's just hold hands then." It was better than kissing. The two of them calmed down for a long time. After a long struggle in their minds, they slowly stretched out their hands and held each other tightly. Their fingers interlocked. On the surface, it looked calm and peaceful. But secretly, although the two of them were holding hands tightly, they were secretly competing with each other. Their grip strength was equal, and they were using all their skills to break each other's hands. However, the two of them appeared to be very calm on the surface, but in their hearts, they were cursing in unison. "Bastard, you have a lot of strength. You win." Yu smiled satisfactorily. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she nodded and said, "Not bad. Uncle and Daddy's relationship seems to have improved a lot. Mommy, look, they're holding hands very tightly." Yin Shih glanced at them and broke out in a cold sweat. How is this a handshake? It was as if they were trying to break each other's hands by shaking hands. In the fourth round, Yu became the landlord in the open, while Hua Jin was the landlord in the dark. The interesting thing was that Mu Yaja and Gong Jie had to hold hands to finish this round because of the punishment from the previous round. It was especially difficult to play with one hand. It was easy to pick the cards, but it took a lot of effort to sort them out. Gong Jie even used his mouth. In the end, he was flustered and messed up the cards, causing them to fall face up on the table. Yu and Hua Jin immediately went over to take a peek. Chapter 2248. Yu said matter-of-factly, "What do you mean by peeking? Uncle was the one who laid out the cards on the table for us to see." However, it had to be said that Mu Yaja was the most ruthless when it came to this. First, he held all the cards in his hand tightly. Then, he looked at the messy cards in his hand. After a few glances, he laid them out on the table one by one. Then, without even looking at them, he rearranged the cards according to the order that he had just memorized. Using his amazing memory, he rearranged the cards and quickly sorted them out. Yu and Yin Shih were stunned. Such an amazing memory. He memorized the order of the cards in just a few glances. Moreover, he sorted them out directly. Yi was perfect. He finally knew who he had inherited his high IQ from. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Because of Mu Yaja's despicable game, he was hoping to see him make a fool of himself with this sentence. In the end, his astonishing memory was truly a show of strength. Although Yu and Hua Jin's cards weren't very good, Yin Shih and Mu Yaja both mistakenly thought that Gong Jie was the secret master. They started an internal conflict and bombarded him indiscriminately. Gong Jie felt wronged. It was already difficult to play the cards. Now that he had finally played the cards, they thought that he was the secret master. However, he couldn't defend himself at all. Gong Jie swallowed his anger and played with a knot in his heart. It wasn't until Hua Jin jumped out and confirmed his identity as the secret master that the truth was revealed. Gong Jie, who had been wrong, cried out, "Sis." Yin Shih bit her lip regretfully and patted his shoulder lightly with guilt. I'm sorry, Xiao Jie. I misunderstood you. Gong Jie said sadly. Why did you all think that I was the secret master? Muyaja said softly. It's your fault for having a bad face. Gong Jie, at this time, Yu only had one pair of cards left in his hand. He looked around coldly. A few people were also staring at him, but they could only stare. There were no more cards that could stop him. Yu sneered and threw out the cards in his hand. Once again, he was the fisherman who reaped the benefits. He stood up and high-fived Huajin. Yeah, we won again. Then, Yu turned around in high spirits and said proudly to the other three people whose faces were ashen as if their souls had left their bodies, I'm so awesome. Yin sure, Gong Jie, Muyaja. At the end of the round, Muyaja and Gong Jie quickly shook off their hands and looked at each other with disdain. However, Yu said softly, don't let go. Gong Jie asked, didn't you say that we would hold hands until the end of the round? I did say that, but didn't you guys lose this round again? Yu laughed evilly and said, then why don't you guys continue holding hands? Gong Jie and Muyaja were speechless again. They took a deep breath and felt as if they were about to vomit. Yin Sure pointed at herself and asked, then what's my punishment? Yu smiled gently and winked at her. He hooked his finger at her and said, Mommy's punishment is to kiss me. What kind of punishment is this? It's obviously a reward for yourself, right? Huajin said softly. Yu said arrogantly, I don't accept any objections. Yin Sure laughed and leaned over to give him a loving peck on the cheek. She rubbed his little head. Chapter 2249. Unknowingly, the five of them fooled around until the end of the last round. It was already 4:50 a.m. However, even though it was already very late, it did not affect their mood at all. However, Yu was sleepy and wanted to sleep. Hence, Yin Sure carried him back to the room and coaxed him to sleep. Once the little devil fell asleep, the game naturally could not continue. As for the other big devil, he was still very energetic. Most of the three men present had multiple jobs and were working day and night. Especially Gong Jie, who often flew around the world due to the international time difference, so he was not sleepy at all. As for Huajin, he was already used to staying up late to film. Hence, at this time, he did not feel very tired. Muyaja was even more so. Before this, he often worked overtime until 4 a.m. Hence, his biological clock was already used to such a late time. However, now that he had a family, his wife and children were waiting for him at home. Naturally, he would not arrange his work to be too late and would start working very early. The four of them sat at the table. Seeing that the game could not continue, Yin Sure brought over a tray of snacks and poured a cup of tea for each of them. Then, they sat down and chatted for a while. At 5 a.m., Yin Sure finally could not take it anymore. She yawned loudly and said that she was sleepy and wanted to go back to her room to rest. Huajin also wanted to go home, but Yin Sure said, it's already so late. Why don't you rest here? There's a guest room upstairs. Won't this disturb you? Huajin asked worriedly. Yin Sure was about to speak when a cold voice interrupted her. A cold voice sounded from the side, yes. Yin Sure turned around in surprise and saw Muyaja looking at her with disdain. So hurry up and go home. Gong Jie immediately retorted on behalf of Huajin. Brother-in-law, you're not cute at all. Actually, you just can't accept it, right? Just now, when we were playing cards, Huajin's luck was too good and he beat you to a pulp. That's why you're upset. Oof, a sore loser. Muyaja said coldly, shut your mouth. Gong Jie glared at him with hostility. Yin Sure hurriedly stepped forward and mediated. All right, stop quarreling. Xiao Jie, you two don't go back. Stay here tonight. When Gong Jie heard this, he pretended to be arrogant and said, I want to, but it seems that brother-in-law doesn't really welcome me. Muyaja immediately replied, yeah, you're not welcome. Look, Yin Sure walked over angrily and pinched Muyaja's face with both hands. Oof, I'm warning you. You'd better be more polite to my Xiao Jie. Muyaja's handsome brows furrowed slightly. However, looking at the woman in front of him who was pouting coquettishly, he only smiled dotingly. He held her hand nonchalantly and pecked her fingertips. All right, I won't say anything else. That's a good boy. Yin Shirshir smiled happily and reached out to pat his head gently. Then, she led Hua Jin and Gong Ji up to the second floor while chatting cheerfully. There were 3 guest rooms, a living room, a study, and a private bathroom on the second floor. After settling them down, Yin Shirshir took 2 cartons of milk and returned to her room. Chapter 2250. The showerhead splashed water. Muyaja stood under the showerhead and allowed the water droplets to fall on his body. He watched as the clear droplets slid down his well-defined and defined skin. It had to be said that his body was comparable to an international model. The inverted triangular figure, the standard golden ratio, and the well-defined mermaid line, all of them were full of hormones. Especially his waist, his 8-pack abs were firm and powerful. His body was very firm, but this kind of firmness was definitely not like those muscular men who looked shiny and oily. He was not thick, but his perfect muscles gave people a great visual impact. It was only when it came to him that Yin Shirshir deeply felt what a real visual feast was. Yin Shirshir bit her lip and said in a daze, "Hubby, you're so sexy." Muyaja looked back and stared at her for a while. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "My wife, why are you having a nosebleed?" "Nosebleed? Yin Shirshir was shocked. She didn't have time to think carefully about the playfulness and teasing in his words. She subconsciously reached out her hand to wipe her nose. However, after wiping again and again, she didn't manage to wipe the blood. A certain silly woman then realized that she had been tricked. She immediately raised her head in displeasure and glared at him. "Why do you like to tease people so much?" Muyaja smiled mischievously. Then, he hooked his finger at her and said in a deep voice, "Come here." His voice was very low, and his extremely magnetic voice resonated in the shower room with a kind of bewitching resonance. Yin Shirshir seemed to have been bewitched. She walked over as if possessed. When she was close enough, she sized him up. "What?" Muyaja suddenly reached out an arm from the shower cubicle, grabbed her hand tightly, and pulled her into the shower cubicle. Before Yin Shirshir could react, she was drenched by the shower head. She only felt the world spinning. When she came back to her senses, she was already pressed against the wall by a certain vile man. Muyaja's naked body covered her like a mountain. Her petite body was controlled by him in this narrow space, with nowhere to run. The milk carton fell to the ground with a thud. The milky white milk dripped along the floor and flowed down the drain. Yin Shirshir looked at him in surprise. Her gaze then fell on his chest, which was so sexy that it was almost suffocating. She involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air and stammered, My clothes are all wet, Sai." "It's okay." The man lowered his eyes and lowered his wet eyelashes. The 2 of them snuggled intimately together. Yin Shirshir only had to look up to see the crystal-clear water droplets on his long eyelashes as they slowly dripped down the ends of his eyelashes. Muyaja reached out to unbutton her shirt. Yin Shirshir shyly grabbed his large hand and said hesitantly, "Shao Jie and Hua Jin are still upstairs." "Don't be like this," Muyaja said disapprovingly. "The soundproofing of this house is very good. You don't have to worry about that." Yin Shirshir was still stammering. Her face was so red that it looked like blood was about to drip out. It was obvious that his initiative made her a little shy. Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but tease Shy. Chapter 2251. The man pecked her lips lightly. His gentle breath and the warm water gave her a great thrill. "We're already an old married couple. What's there to be shy about?" Unexpectedly, this sentence made Yin Shirshir blush even more. She couldn't be any more embarrassed. "Old married couple," she muttered unhappily. "Who's an old married couple with you?" The wedding hadn't even been held yet. They could only be considered newlyweds. In the end, this man had jumped to the old married couple mode. However, Muyaja ignored her small mutterings. Like an evil demon king, he gently and patiently enticed her. "Don't tell me you don't want me?" His voice was so low and bewitching that Yin Shirshir bit her lip, but she didn't dare to act rashly. Their bodies were so close together that she quickly felt the subtle changes in his body. Sensing this change, she was shocked again. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, not knowing what to do. Look, Muyaja said, it's already in high spirits because of you. Yin Shirshir felt wronged. She quibbled, I didn't do anything. However, Muyaja said, little thing, you didn't do anything, but you're already damned tempting. He suddenly hugged her, his large palm holding her little hand gently. Then he said bewitchingly, touch, touch. Yin Shirshir's eyes widened instantly. Like a frightened rabbit, she looked helpless and didn't know where to place her hands. Touch, touch there. She had never touched there with her hands before. Actually, she was very curious deep down. She didn't know how it felt to touch that place, but she felt that such an action was a little obscene and lascivious. Being restrained by such thoughts, she didn't dare to overstep this step. You don't dare? Seeing how shy she was, Muyaja couldn't help but smile. Then, he grabbed her hand and slowly explored that unknown and mysterious place. Once his fingertips touched that scalding heat, Yin Shirshir screamed and tried to withdraw her hand, but he held it firmly. What happened? So hot. Yin Shirshir blushed as she described. It feels so hot that I can't hold it. Idiot, Muyaja complained. Just as he was about to continue, Yin Shirshir stopped him and said, don't move. I can do it myself. Muyaja let go of her hand. Yin Shirshir continued this action that made people blush and their hearts race. Her hands were very small and very white, but they were as smooth as jade and as fine as silk. Some people's hands were naturally beautiful, and her hands were one of them. They were as beautiful as a piece of art. Because of her touch, he was extremely aroused. Very quickly, a numbing current flashed across his waist. In his impulse, he couldn't wait to take her directly. However, he was worried that this would scare her. Hence, he had to grit his teeth and restrain himself as he waited for her next move. At this time, she was already sweating profusely, and the clothes on her body were all wet from the shower. She could no longer tell whether the wet patch on her back was sweat or hot water from the shower. Chapter 2252. The domineering and mesmerizing kiss was like a mellow wine, intoxicating her to the point where her head felt light and her feet felt light. The man in front of her was handsome and languid, exuding a bewitching aura from head to toe. He was simply irresistibly charming. She hated herself for being so disappointing, and her throat moved a little. This subtle movement was noticed by him, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Yin Shirshir lowered her eyes and blinked shyly. The man murmured lazily as he breathed into her ear. She complained, "You eat so much usually, but I don't see you gaining any weight." The man's low and magnetic voice rang in her ear. "Idiot, this is my physique." His hot breath brushed against her ear. Just like that, he patiently guided her slowly. Even though it was a little reckless, at least she understood the gist of it. She raised her head and glared at him, feeling a little annoyed. Yin Shirshir's eyelids twitched for a while. Her mind was in a mess, so much so that her movements lost their rhythm and became hurried. She bit her lip in embarrassment. The more she thought about it, the more embarrassed she felt. So much so that she was not paying attention. The man suddenly grabbed her hand tightly. Sure. What's wrong?" The man tugged on her earlobe and deliberately hurt her. He chided in dissatisfaction. "You're so clumsy." "Umph. I'll cripple you if you continue to talk nonsense." "You dare?" "Do you think I dare?" "Huh. You dare to do that?" "So what? Who's afraid of who?" The man could not help but smile as a playful look flashed past his eyes. He suddenly grabbed her chin and kissed her. Pressing his lips against hers, he said casually, "Stubborn little idiot." He was no longer passive and took the initiative to attack. Muyaja pulled her shoulders and turned her back to him, aggressively occupying her from behind. Her body trembled, and the coquettish blush on her face flew all the way to the tip of her ears. This look was simply too adorable. The smile in his eyes deepened. After it was over, Muyaja carried her to the bed, covered her with a blanket, and held her in his arms. However, the hands of the woman in his arms were restlessly climbing up and down his body. Muyaja grabbed her hand unhappily and asked sternly, "What are you doing?" Yin Shirshir plucked up her courage and said, I just want to try how your abs feel. Muyaja's face turned green. Can I just touch it? Yin Shirshir's curiosity was overflowing. She acted coquettishly and kissed him to please him. Just satisfy my curiosity. No. The man refused mercilessly. Yin Shirshir pouted and complained. You're so heartless. Why did you let me touch you when you were feeling comfortable? Why are you not letting me touch you now? Stingy. Humph. Muyaja ignored her and held her hand firmly, refusing to let her have her way. Since he refused to let her, her rebellious heart rose and she reached out to touch him. However, the moment she reached out, the man turned around and avoided her touch, unwilling to let her touch him. Yin Shirshir began to attack him without restraint. She pushed and punched him, and the two of them started to mess around under the blanket, pushing and shoving each other. Chapter 22:53. But the moment she stretched out her hand, the man turned around and avoided her touch, unwilling to let her touch him. Yin Shirshir started to attack him without restraint, pushing and punching him. The two of them started to mess around under the blanket, pushing and shoving each other. In the end, the two of them were sweating profusely, but Yin Shirshir was still unwilling to give up. It was as if she would not give up until she achieved her goal. She continued to move her hands all over him, insisting on experiencing that feeling. The man suddenly flipped over and pinned her under him. He said, I'll let you touch me, but you'll have to bear the consequences. Yin Shirshir burst out laughing when she heard that and retorted in exasperation. What consequences can there be? It's not like you'll break it. Oomph. Since you think so. As the man said this, he grabbed her little hand and moved it downwards. Yin Shirshir finally got what she wanted. However, once she achieved her goal, her heart started to beat even faster. Thump, thump, thump. Coincidentally, the man pinned her under his body. The sonorous and powerful heartbeat in his chest echoed in her ears. She had only touched him lightly with a smile, but very quickly, it was as hot as steel again. Yin Shirshir's mind was filled with question marks. What's going on? She didn't do anything. All she did was touch him. How did he return to this state? Was there ever a time when this man was exhausted? The man pretended to be innocent as he defended himself. Idiot, you have to take responsibility. I didn't do anything. Yin Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're so energetic. Muyaja gave her little tender lips a peck in amusement and said righteously, That's because I've met something I like. That's why I have so much energy. Yin Shirshir smiled and pushed his shoulder. All right, let's go down. I'm not playing anymore. Let's go to sleep. You want to sleep just like that? Muyaja harumphed coldly. But how could he let her off so easily? It had finally calmed down, and now it had returned to such a state. Shouldn't she be responsible for it? Before the woman could protest, her weak voice of resistance was quickly swallowed by the man's passionate kiss. It was an enchanting night until dawn, on the first day of the new year. Gong Jie woke up in the afternoon. He walked around downstairs and realized that Xiaoyi Chen had also woken up early. Xiaoyi Chen went to bed early, so he woke up early. Since he was awake, Yu naturally got up as well. After Yu got dressed and washed up, she walked into the living room and saw Gong Jie and Xiaoyi Chen sitting in front of the TV, playing games together. Yu loved to play video games, so he bought a lot of gaming equipment at home. He bought an Xbox 360, an iWii, a PS4, and a large pack of game discs. Xiaoyi Chen loved to play video games as well, so when he had nothing to do, he liked to sit in front of the TV and play games. The two of them were playing games in full swing. In the dining room, Yu yawned repeatedly as she cooked lunch. After the dishes were served, Gong Jie and Xiaoyi Chen walked over. Coincidentally, Huajin had also woken up and was walking down the stairs. Brother Huajin, come down and eat. Brother Huajin. A trace of warmth slid down his heart. Huajin couldn't help but smile as he sat down at the dining table. Yu distributed the bowls and chopsticks. Gong Jie suddenly asked, Where's your mommy? It's time to wake her up and eat. Chapter 22:54. Oh, they're probably still sleeping. Let's not disturb them. It's already midnight. It's time for them to wake up. As Gong Jie spoke, He coaxed Xiao Qin and said, "You're in charge of waking them up." "No way." Yu scooped a bowl of rice for him and said seriously, "They probably slept very late last night, so they shouldn't be awake at this time. Let them sleep a little longer. When they wake up, they can take care of their own lunch." Gong Jie couldn't help but be suspicious. He asked curiously, "How do you know that they slept very late?" Yu held his chopsticks in his mouth and smiled elegantly. "Uncle, you're single. You shouldn't ask so casually. If you don't ask, you won't get hurt." The table of single people understood instantly. Hua Jin held his stomach and laughed. "Ha ha ha." This Yu didn't sound like a 7-year-old child at all when he spoke. Instead, he sounded like a mature man. It was so funny. Gong Jie flicked his forehead and said angrily, "What are you laughing at?" Hua Jin laughed and said, "I didn't expect you to be single too." Yu smiled and said, "Uncle, you're single. Brother Hua Jin is also single. Why don't you two hold hands and get together?" Gong Jie said rudely, "Get lost." Hua Jin's face turned pale, but it quickly turned red, and he said, "I'm straight. I like women. But I saw you two playing the paper towel game last night. You two had great chemistry. Come to think of it, you two have kissed 10 times. At this point, Yu suddenly leaned forward and looked at Gong Jie. He teased, "How was it? When you two kissed, did you feel like you were electrocuted?" Xiao Qin was confused as he listened. He slept very early last night, so he didn't participate in the mahjong game last night. Naturally, he didn't know about those exciting things. "Get lost." Gong Jie's face darkened. "This isn't considered kissing. You obviously wanted to stir up trouble. Uncle, you're so handsome and rich. Why can't you find a girlfriend? Is it because there's something wrong with your sexual orientation? Scram. Don't tell me you like pretty boys. Scram. How about I betroth Brother Hua Jin to you? Scram." Speaking of this, Gong Jie was filled with anger. He had touched a sore spot. What an annoying brat. Xiao Qin was about to go crazy. His curiosity was overflowing. "What are you guys talking about? After I fell asleep yesterday, did you guys fool around behind my back?" Gong Jie was in a bad mood. Xiao Qin was chattering at the side. He looked up at the little guy and snorted coldly. He urged him, "Eat your food." Xiao Qin whimpered and pouted. He buried his face in grievance and focused on eating. He felt wronged, but he didn't say anything. Yu was amused by Xiao Qin's bitter expression. He covered his mouth and snickered. He explained, "Last night, the 5 of us were playing mahjong. Uncle lost, so Daddy punished him by playing a paper towel game with Brother Hua Jin." A paper towel game. Yup. Brother Hua Jin was responsible for sucking the paper towel into his mouth. Then Uncle had to suck the paper towel from his mouth and throw it into the trash can, and so on. He had to do this 10 times to complete his punishment. Chapter 2255. Coincidentally, Gong Jie was sitting opposite him. The rice that Xiao Qin spat out landed directly on Gong Jie's face. Suppressing his anger, he closed his eyes and clenched his fists tightly. It was not until he repeatedly brewed his anger that he finally managed to calm down. When he opened his eyes, he was gritting his teeth. "Do you have a death wish?" Xiao Qin immediately panicked and explained, No, Uncle. I didn't mean to mock you. It would have been better if you didn't try to hide it." Gong Jie's face darkened when he heard the explanation. "You're obviously mocking me." Yu suddenly took out his cell phone, played the video, and showed it to Xiao Qin. "You went to bed early last night, so you missed a lot. However, I took a video. Here, I'll show it to you." Gong Jie turned pale with fright when he saw this. He exclaimed in disbelief, "You actually took a video?" Yu said matter-of-factly, "It would be a pity if I didn't take a video of such an exciting segment." Xiao Qin took the cell phone and watched it with great interest. When he saw Gong Jie sucking the tissue from Hua Jin's mouth with an ashen face, he laughed out loud. "Ayaya, Uncle's expression is so interesting. Ha ha ha." "Shut up." Gong Jie reached out to grab the cell phone. However, Xiao Qin was not inferior in terms of agility. He dodged nimbly and jumped down from the chair. He held the cell phone and hid in a corner where Gong Jie couldn't reach him. "You're still watching." Gong Jie pushed his chair away and stood up to chase after him. Xiao Qin turned around and made a face at him provocatively. Then, he ran up to the second floor. Gong Jie followed him to the second floor. Knock, knock, knock. Yu and Hua Jin looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders in tacit understanding. In the end, little Li Chen was caught by Gong Jie, who snatched the phone away from him. He swiftly deleted the video and then taught the little guy a lesson. When Gong Jie carried Xiao Yichen downstairs, the meat on the table had already been eaten. Where's the meat? On the sofa. Hua Jin and Yu hugged their round bellies and licked their lips. It's all in our stomachs. Gong Jie was speechless. That move just now couldn't have been to lure the tiger away from the mountain, right? Yu reprimanded them righteously. Who asked you to be so restless? Eat your food properly. Don't blame us if you can't get the meat. Feeling angry and aggrieved, little Li Chen complained, you're too much. You did this on purpose. As they spoke, the two little guys started to mess around. Gong Jie watched in silence. All of a sudden, he smiled knowingly. These two little nephews were really two little elves. They were both cute and mischievous. He was a little envious, but also had an inexplicable yearning. It was probably a very blissful thing to be able to have such a peaceful life. The two kids messed around and made a lot of noise. It unexpectedly aroused his desire for a family. Since he was young, his concept of family was very cold and vague. To him, the Gong family was more like a huge royal family than a simple and ordinary family. All the family members had their own missions. Even when he was young, he couldn't mess around like this without any scruples. In the face of huge benefits, every family member was eyeing covetously. Therefore, Gong Jie had always been vague about the concept of family. He only thought that family was just a place to stay. Chapter 2256. If his father knew that he had two adorable grandsons, he would be overjoyed, right? At this thought, Gong Jie's expression froze. However, would there be a day when they could reunite? On the one hand, he hoped that his father would know that he had two adorable grandsons. On the other hand, from Yin Shishir's perspective, he hoped that his father would never know. This way, he would not disturb their peaceful life. The feud between the Gongs and Mews was not something that could be explained in a few words. The hatred between the Gongs and the Mews was unfathomable. If his father knew that he would never allow his sister to be with Mu Yaja, he would definitely interfere. His sister would be heartbroken, though. Through this period of understanding, Gong Jie knew that his sister loved that man deeply. Hence, for the sake of his sister's happiness, he would never do anything that would make her sad. No matter what kind of feud existed between the two families, it had nothing to do with Mu Yaja. Although he hated the Mews, he could not bear to be ruthless toward the man who could give his sister happiness. This was probably what it meant to love the house and its crow. For his sister's sake, he could choose to tolerate Mu Yaja in all aspects. However, at the same time, he could not confess this matter to his father. He was worried that his father would not be able to accept it. Yes, his father and mother's love was also destroyed by that executioner, Mu Sheng. A car accident separated heaven and earth forever. Love, hate, anger, and infatuation. He did not wish for his father to become the second Mu Sheng. Hence, he would keep this matter a secret for as long as possible. Even if it was a little difficult for him to be sandwiched between his father and sister, he had no other choice now. Smack! Just as Gong Jie was deep in thought, a pillow flew directly at his face. He caught it and saw the two children playing around on the sofa, each hugging a pillow and hitting each other. Wah wah wah! Save me! I'm going to die! Under Yu's attack, Xiao Yichen quickly lost the upper hand. Gong Jie's face darkened as he thought to himself, idiot! You two brats, stop messing around. Uncle, you bullied me. Uncle, teach this fellow a lesson for me. Oomph. Just as the three of them were fooling around, the phone rang. Everyone fell silent. Yu followed the sound and found the phone on the sofa. Surprised, she asked, "Whose phone is this?" When Hua Jin saw this, he raised his hand and said, "Mine." "Yes, someone is calling you." Yu handed her the phone. Hua Jin took the phone and glanced at the number displayed on the screen. His face immediately turned cold. Under everyone's strange gazes, he hurriedly walked to the balcony and picked up the phone. "Little Ya? Jin, Lin Shuia's willful and coquettish cries came from the other end of the line. There was a hint of helplessness and uneasiness in her voice, but more than that, it sounded soft and coquettish. She sobbed, "Where are you?" I'm at home." Huajin did not think too much about it and lied that he was at home. However, as soon as he said that, he felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. On the other end, Lin Shuia stood in Huajin's apartment. Looking around, a trace of cold disappointment appeared on her exquisitely made-up face. "Is that so? Then why don't I see you?" Chapter 2257. Was she in the apartment? Today was not the first day of the Lunar New Year. Why would she come out to look for him at this time? Huajin walked over to the clothes rack, picked up his coat, and put it on. Lin Shuia's intermittent cries could be heard from the other end of the line. She sounded weak and helpless. Compared to her usual haughtiness and haughtiness, she now looked like a helpless little bird. "I'll give you half an hour. Come on my side immediately. Jean, I need you." Now, Lin Shuia ended the fairy tale with an almost commanding tone. Huajin held the cell phone in a daze for a while. Then he smiled bitterly and turned around. "You, Xiaoi Chen, I have something to do now. I need to rush back immediately. When Shir and Chairman Mu wake up, please pass on my wishes for a Happy New Year to them." "Brother Huajin, where are you going?" Yu asked suspiciously. Huajin pondered for a moment and smiled helplessly. "I have something important to do. I have to leave immediately." "I'm sorry. It's okay. If it's urgent, then go quickly. We'll pass on your New Year's greetings for you." "All right." Huajin took out 2 red packets from the pocket of his shirt and gave one to each of them. "This is a red packet I prepared for both of you. It's a little token of my appreciation." "Thank you, Brother Huajin." Xiaoi Chen and you were beaming with joy. Huajin bent down and kissed the 2 little fellows on their foreheads. Then he turned around and left in a hurry. When Huajin returned to the apartment, he stood at the door and saw a pair of high heels sitting quietly on the shoe cabinet outside. She was here. His heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Her arrival did not bring him a trace of joy. Instead, it made his originally joyous mood even heavier. He did not like Lin Shuia at all. In fact, he hated her. Being together with her was more like a way to make do with each other. Having debuted in the entertainment industry for so many years, he had won many dazzling awards with his outstanding acting skills. Many people said that he was born to be an actor. He had a face that was more beautiful and charming than a woman's. It was definitely a gift from the heavens. What made people even more jealous was that he was obviously not an actor, but he was blessed by the heavens. His natural acting skills were praised by many veteran actors. That's right, his acting skills had reached the pinnacle of perfection. It was as if he was born with it. Therefore, in front of her, he was able to show his love and infatuation for her, even though he was clearly disgusted with her. When he was with her, he put on a show as if he was wearing a mask all the time. This was also a form of torture. The apartment was unlocked with his fingerprint. He opened the door and walked in. He found that all the lights were on and the curtains were tightly closed. Huajin had only just stepped through the door, but he felt his heart sink for no reason. In this way, where's the end? Usually, he would accept scripts and act. No matter what, he would leave the cast and crew after 1 or 2 years. But when would the script with Lin Shuia end? The apartment had 1 bedroom and 1 living room. It was more than 60 square meters, but it gave him a cold feeling. It was as if he was on a desolate island. Huajin placed his phone on the table and walked into the living room. There was no one there. He pushed open the bedroom door, but she was not there. Xiaoya. Chapter 2258. Was he already gone? Impossible. Huajin suddenly thought of something and walked to the bathroom door. Through the closed door, he could clearly hear the sound of water splashing from the bathroom. His heart skipped a beat, and he pushed the door open. A gust of warm steam hit him in the face. Huajin's eyes widened. His gaze pierced through the mist and caught sight of a figure sitting in the huge bathtub. The heater in the bathroom was turned on, and the difference in temperature was like heaven and earth. Huajin walked in and closed the bathroom door. He walked slowly to the side of the bathtub and squatted down gently. He saw Lin Shuia hugging her knees and sitting in the bathtub. She had not taken off her clothes. She sat in the bathtub with her clothes on and allowed the shower head to soak her. She buried her face in the crook of her arms. Her lonely figure seemed to have a lot on her mind. Even when Hua Jin called her softly many times, she did not respond. "Xiaoyao, what's wrong?" Hua Jin asked gently. He had never been so patient in front of ordinary people. He asked over and over again without getting tired of it. It was only then that Lin Shuya lifted her head. However, her eyes were red and bloodshot. The water on her face was dripping wet. For a moment, it was hard to tell whether it was water droplets or tears on her face. "What's wrong?" Hua Jin saw this and frowned slightly. He could not figure out why she was so despondent. "Jin," Lin Xue suddenly turned around and hugged his shoulders. She mumbled helplessly, "Let's go far away together, okay? Just the two of us. Leave this place and never come back." Hua Jin frowned and was stunned for a moment. He held her shoulders and met her helpless and lost eyes. He could not help but laugh. "Why are you suddenly saying this? My father talked to me last night. He said that he would arrange a marriage between me and the Mu family." Before New Year's Eve, Mu Linfeng found an opportunity to meet Lin Shuya's father, Lin Boxiong. The Lin family was a prominent family in the capital. Perhaps the Lin family could not be compared to the Mu family and the Gu family. However, as one of the four famous families, the Lin family was not only a scholarly family, but Lin Shuya's grandfather was also one of the 10 founding fathers of the country. Even though he had retired many years ago, he still held great power. It could be said that the Lin family's background was influential in the capital. Lin Shuya's grandfather was an upright person. Therefore, even though he was not in power and did not speak, he still had a certain amount of prestige. Lin Shuya's father was in politics, while her mother was in business. Qin Zhou once used these words to describe the Lin family. The Lin family is not comparable to the Song family. Even if the threshold of the Lin family was leveled, they would still be one level higher than the Song family. Although Old Master Lin and Old Master Song were both founding fathers of the nation, the power of the two families could not be compared in the same breath. While Song Yinya's father was only a minister, Lin Shuya's father now held an important position with military power in his hands. If it were the Qing dynasty, he would be equivalent to the commander of the Nine Gates. His influence was something that the Song family could not compare to. In other words, if the central government wants to deploy troops, they have to abide by the Lin's wishes. Chapter 2259. Mu Linfeng and Lin Boxiong chatted happily. Since both of them held important positions in the Jun district, their conversation naturally went smoothly. Mu Yinqing was present that day as well. Under Mu Linfeng's repeated reminders, Mu Yinqing performed well. In front of Lin Boxiong, he was courteous, humble, and elegant. In the face of such a situation, he did not show the slightest bit of stage fright. Lin Boxiong was quite satisfied with him. Previously, news of Mu Yaja's resignation as the head of the family had naturally reached the Lin family and his ears. Lin Boxiong appeared calm on the surface, but deep down he knew very well that Mu Linfeng wanted to support Mu Yinqing to become the head of the Mu family. At the mention of Mu Yaja, Lin Boxiong sighed again and again, feeling that it was a pity. If it were Mu Yaja sitting next to Mu Linfeng that day, he would have slapped the table and agreed without hesitation. Lin Boxiong had met Mu Yaja a few times, and they had also met a few times. His impression of the man was that he was a rather outstanding young talent. Despite his young age, he was brimming with talent. Having been in the business world for many years, he was ruthless and had a unique eye for talent. He was able to bring the Mu group, which had been in decline, back to its peak. If such an outstanding man were to marry his precious daughter, Lin Boxiong would naturally be overjoyed. Then again, even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. When Lin Boxiong learned that Mu Yaja had given up his position as the head of the family for a commoner girl, he could not help but sigh, but he also admired the latter's courage and extraordinary sense of responsibility. Mu Yinqing was young and handsome, but compared to Mu Yaja, he was nothing. Therefore, Lin Boxiong did not agree on the spot. He only said that after the festival, He would arrange for the two children to meet and have a meal together so that they could get to know each other better. If they felt that they were compatible, the marriage could be settled as soon as possible. Mu Linfeng and Lin Buoxiong were two sly old foxes with their own agendas. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was bent on boosting Mu Yinxing's power through this marriage alliance, so that he could ascend to the position of the family head in one fell swoop. If he married Lin Shuya, he could rely on the Lin family's influence to secure his position as the family head in the future. What about Lin Buoxiong? His heart was heavy with worry. Lin Shuya was his most treasured daughter. At the same time, she was also the most troublesome child. Perhaps it was because she had been pampered too much since she was young that everything went according to her wishes. This kind of pampering had gradually evolved into spoiling. Immersed in such a doting environment, Lin Shuya's character became arrogant and willful. She did things her own way and was unreasonable to the point of being willful. Although she was willful and a little spoiled, it was fine. However, he had not taught his daughter well. He had to admit that. Lin Buoxiong thought to himself, "Anyway, when the time comes, my daughter will eventually be married off. I'll find her a gentle husband who will pamper her and love her. When she has children in the future, she will naturally grow up and become sensible." That was what Lin Buoxiong thought, so he just let her be. Little did he know that the more he let her do as she pleased, the more out of control she became. His daughter was actually fooling around with an actor outside. The Lin family adhered to tradition. After all, they came from a scholarly family. Regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl, they paid great attention to etiquette and self-restraint. Chapter 2260. When Lin Buoxiong found out that his most beloved daughter was secretly keeping a gigolo in the entertainment industry, he was furious. He had secretly done a background check on this little lover. When he got his hands on the information, he glanced through it and found that it was full of misdeeds. One could only imagine how furious Lin Buoxiong was at that time. He had always had high expectations for Lin Shuya and had always raised her like a well-bred young lady. However, he did not expect her to fool around behind his back. In a fit of anger, Lin Buoxiong sent a few men to find Hua Jin and warned him to stay away from his daughter. Of course, Hua Jin was more than happy to do so and agreed repeatedly. However, when Lin Shuya found out, she went home and raged with Lin Buoxiong. Her words made it clear that it was impossible for her to cut all ties with Hua Jin. Even if he wanted to arrange a marriage for her, she would gladly accept it. However, there was a condition. Her future husband must not interfere with her private matters with Hua Jin. How preposterous were these words? A married woman was still entangled with other men outside. If it was any other husband's family, they would not be able to tolerate it. Although there were many women who married into rich families, they did not have any feelings for their husbands. In the end, they went their separate ways and did not ask about each other. However, Lin Shuya was different. Lin Shuya was born in the Lin family. If she were to stir up the foul atmosphere, the Lin family's reputation would be ruined. Of course, Lin Buoxiong would not agree and scolded Lin Shuya badly. Lin Shuya was used to doing things her own way. Why would she listen to him? She insisted and said that Hua Jin was her bottom line. If this bottom line was not violated, everything could be discussed. However, if it was violated, she would not let it go. Because of this, he flew into a rage and repeatedly asked Lin Shuya to cut off all ties with Hua Jin. Not only did Lin Shuya not listen to him and cut off all ties with this gigolo, the situation became worse. The originally harmonious relationship between the father and daughter gradually became like walking on thin ice. Lin Buoxiong gradually lost confidence in his daughter. Originally, he wasn't worried about her marriage, but now he couldn't wait for this unfilial daughter to get married. Firstly, he hoped that this daughter of his would change her mind. At the very least, if she could have a child after getting married, she should not be entangled with that man for the sake of the child. Hence, Lin Buoxiong had no objections when Mu Linfeng invited him to discuss this matter. Marrying into the Mu family was a good choice. Even though he did not particularly approve, or like Mu Yinxing, if he could subdue his daughter, he would approve of this marriage. However, when it came to marriage, Lin Buoxiong was quite open-minded. He didn't have the final say. He wanted to bring his daughter to meet each other. If they had a good impression of each other, they might as well try to date each other and arrange a marriage. Mu Linfeng agreed and arranged for the two children to meet after the Lantern Festival. When they got home, Lin Boxiong told Lin Shuya about it. Lin Shuya's face immediately darkened, and she immediately refused. However, on this point, Lin Boxiong's attitude was quite unyielding and did not allow for refusal. No matter what you think, it's not up to you to decide on this matter. I'm only telling you this so that you can be mentally prepared. Whether you want to go or not, you have to go this time even if you don't want to. Chapter 2261. After a pause, Lin Boxiong continued. Also, I'm warning you. Don't you dare play any tricks. I won't fall for it. When you're on the stage, you have to show me all the good manners that I've taught you. You should know what to do in your heart. If you don't do as I say, I have ways to make you regret it. Lin Shuya could hear the undisguised threat in her father's words. She raised her head abruptly, only to see her father's gaze, which was different from his usual calmness. Instead, it was filled with a bloodthirsty viciousness. She knew that her father was truly enraged and might even resort to some means to make a living. She immediately thought of Hua Jin and cried out, "What are you going to do to Hua Jin? He deliberately tried to lure you into a trap. For a man like him, breaking his legs will be considered going easy on him. I think you've been bewitched by him and have fallen head over heels for him. I think that kid's face is especially good looking. I like to see if you'll still be distracted by him, if I cut his face and he doesn't have that kind of appearance anymore." Lin Boxiong snorted coldly, his tone scornful and cruel. Lin Shuya immediately screamed in fear. "You can't treat him like this. Dad, don't force me, okay? I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry anyone else. I just want to stay by Hua Jin's side. I love him. I want to be with him forever and never be separated. Why can't you fulfill my wish?" "Because people are never equal from the moment they're born," Lin Boxiong said coldly. "People are never equal from the moment they're born." Lin Shuya was born noble, while Hua Jin was as lowly as a speck of dust. These two people could only exist in parallel worlds and could never cross paths with each other. However, the only reason Lin Shuya and Hua Jin had a temporary intersection was because she appeared when Hua Jin was at his lowest. Lin Boxiong patiently persuaded her, "Xiaoya, Dad really doesn't understand you. I really don't understand you. Tell me, why don't you fight for the position of young madam instead of getting entangled with a poor actor? There's no future between the two of you at all. Don't you know how many people have toyed with this kid that you've always doted on before he debuted? He's just a lowly figure with no dignity to speak of. You'll only sully your reputation if you get together with him. Could it be that you really haven't investigated this kid's past? In the words of the ancient times, this brat was a small prostitute in the ancient times. He was specially used for those influential people to play with. He was born to be a plaything. You'll only be humiliated if you get together with him. How can such a lowly person like him? If this were to spread out, wouldn't it make you and the Lin family a laughingstock? Your grandfather has sacrificed so much for the Lin family. The Lin family's reputation today can't be reduced to ashes because of a single mistake from you." Lin Shuya's face turned pale. "That's enough." Lin Shuya clenched his fists. How was she not aware of Hua Jin? Chapter 2262. Later on, she used her influence to bring Hua Jin away from those foul places. But she didn't care about his past. In her eyes, Hua Jin was still pure and beautiful. She didn't know whether her feelings for him were out of pity or admiration, but these feelings were now deeply rooted and unshakable. What's wrong with loving someone? She loved a man deeply. Even if this man was as insignificant as a speck of dust, she could still put down her pride and sink into the dust with him. She knew very well that Hua Jin did not have her in his heart. He was merely putting on an act to please her and make her happy. She knew very well that the tenderness he had shown was nothing but an illusion. Those words of love were all against his heart. But she didn't care, because she loved him. Her love for him was enough. As long as she could be with him, it didn't matter even if it was just an act. Lin Buxiong saw that she was still stubborn and said angrily, "I will never allow you to tarnish the Lin family's reputation." Hearing this, Lin Shuya fell silent. After a long while, she suddenly asked faintly, "Dad, you don't agree with me being with Hua Jin because you're afraid that I'll tarnish the Lin family's reputation, right? Since that's the case, why don't you just kick me out of the family? I'm no longer a member of the Lin family. This way, no matter what I do, I won't embarrass the Lin family, and you won't feel embarrassed because I'm your daughter. This way, won't it suit your heart and suit your purpose?" Bastard. Old Master Lin's rage could be heard from the second floor. He stood on the second floor and glared at Lin Shuya's figure. He banged his walking stick on the floor, unable to calm his anger. He roared, "How did the Lin family raise such a rebellious daughter like you? You have no sense of shame. You actually betrayed your family for a man. Good. Very good. Since you don't acknowledge the Lin family, then get lost now. Get out of this house and don't come back. Get as far away as you can." Lin Shuya did not say a word. She turned around and walked towards the door. When Lin Buxiong saw this, he became anxious. He didn't expect his daughter to be so stubborn. She would leave just like that. He hurriedly chased after her. Behind him, old Master Lin scolded angrily. "What are you chasing after? Tell her to scram. Get out of here. It's fine if the Lin clan doesn't acknowledge such an unfilial descendant." So be it. Lin Shuya also lost her temper and left the Lin family without looking back. She wandered the streets all night alone. Because of the new year, the bustling city had become an empty city. She walked to the quiet path and didn't know how long she had been walking. The night was cold and dewy. Snowflakes drifted down from the sky, but she didn't feel the coldness at all. She kept her head down and walked all the way. She walked from the East Ring Road to the South Ring Road. In such a big capital city, she actually walked for an entire night, until the sun rose on the horizon. This time, Lin Shuya realized that she had unknowingly walked to the door of Hua Jin's apartment. This was probably her last shelter that could accommodate her. "Jin," Lin Shuya hugged his shoulders. She was as despondent and helpless as a child. Hua Jin couldn't help but hug her back. His eyes widened in confusion. Then, he heard Lin Shuya ask helplessly, "Do you really love me?" Chapter 2263. My father said that if I continue to be entangled with you, he'll chase me out of the family. But, Jin, as long as I'm with you, I'm not afraid of anything. Lin Shuya suddenly became agitated. Her face flushed red as she held his shoulders tightly and said, "As long as I'm with you, even if I'm no longer the daughter of the Lin family, even if my life is dull and difficult, as long as I'm with you, I'm not afraid of anything." After a pause, she pursed her lips as tears streamed down her cheeks. Suddenly, she hugged him tightly and begged in an almost humble manner, "You don't have to worry now. I've already left the Lin family. Last night, I had a showdown with them. I don't want you. I only want you." So, she had already compromised so much for him. Could he love her a little more? Even if this love was out of pity, she didn't care anymore. "Jin, let's be together, okay? Other than you, I don't have anything else. So let's be together, okay?" As soon as Lin Shuya's voice fell, Hua Jin hugged her expressionlessly. Even his heartbeat didn't fluctuate at all. It was so calm that it made one's heart palpitate. She didn't dare to ask anymore. From this silence, she saw the answer. All of a sudden, the world collapsed in an instant. Lin Shuya's body went limp, and she slowly fell into the bathtub. Her gaze was empty and lifeless. In fact, she already knew the answer to this. No matter how superb Hua Jin's acting skills were, how could Lin Shuya, who was as sensitive as a woman, not be unable to see that his tenderness and adoration were just a facade? "Are you just using me?" Lin Shuya asked in a daze. She suddenly looked up and said in grief, "I've done so much for you. Why are you so stingy with me? I've given up so much for you, even betraying my family. But why don't you even have a place for me in your heart?" Hua Jin's expression froze for a moment. He continued to look at her blankly. His gaze fell on her without any emotion. Pity, but only pity. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Lin Shuya gripped his shoulders tightly, her gaze lingering on his face as she pleaded, "Hua Jin, tell me, Tell me. I want to hear the truth. I don't want to deceive myself anymore. You don't have to act anymore, okay? Tell me, did you really not love me even a little bit? Not even a little bit? Even if there's a tiny bit of space in your heart that belongs to me, that's good enough. Hua Jin remained silent. Say it, Lin Xia urged, her heart trembling with fear. As long as Hua Jin said that he liked her a little or cared about her, she would be fearless. Even if the world collapsed, she would have no regrets. He was the only one who answered, even if it was just one word. Yes, she would also do it for him until the end of the world, no matter what. However, after a long period of silence, Hua Jin finally looked at her and said, "Actually, you don't have to be so stubborn." As he spoke, he reached out and brushed her hand away from his shoulder. This action, however, startled her. Chapter 2264. It was as if the moment she let go of him, a certain kind of bond between them would be completely broken. I don't want to, Lin Xia said stubbornly. I don't want to. I just want to be with you. But I don't like you. Hua Jin asked out of the blue. Lin Xia was stunned and stared at him in disbelief. What? You heard me very clearly. When he finally said this, Hua Jin calmed down and said seriously, I don't like you. From the beginning until now, I don't have any feelings for you. It's just that I'm very grateful for your care and attachment to me. But that's all. You're lying. Lin Xia couldn't believe it. Or rather, she didn't dare to believe such cruel words. She said to herself in self-deception, You clearly said that you love me very much. When they were together, whether it was kissing or being intimate, were all the words of love that he had said to her fake? Were they really fake? Even though she had her doubts, if he had lied to her from the beginning, couldn't he lie to her until the end? However, Hua Jin was exceptionally calm, so calm that it was almost heartless. He looked at her gently and asked, Didn't you want to hear the truth? Sure. Hua Jin's lips curled into a smile. I'll tell you. Lin Xia suddenly didn't want to listen anymore and turned her head away. However, Hua Jin raised his hand and grabbed her chin, looking at her seriously. He stared at her teary eyes and said casually, Xiaoya, you and I are not compatible in the first place. You're the daughter of a prestigious family, a high and mighty missy with a noble status. What about me? You should have investigated my background and my past, right? Lin Xia suddenly fell silent. Her thoughts flew and she sank into her memories. The first time she met Hua Jin was at a private banquet. This private banquet was organized by a friend of hers. At the gathering, everyone brought their partners. And the first time she saw Hua Jin, he was beside a middle-aged man. Lin Xia didn't know that middle-aged man. She heard from her friend that he was the behind-the-scenes boss of an entertainment management company and had a strong backing. And the first time she saw Hua Jin, she was deeply attracted to his delicate and beautiful appearance. The so-called love at first sight was probably nothing more than this. She liked his pair of misty eyes. She liked his quiet and melancholy temperament. She liked him sitting in the corner with his entire body shrouded in a heart-wrenching loneliness. Almost no woman would be able to resist such a temperament, and they would feel pity for him. SSSSSS. SSSSS. Lin Xia, who had always been proud and domineering, felt an inexplicable tenderness from the bottom of her heart when she met him. She wanted to love him and Beezus. At first, the boss didn't know her identity. However, after being introduced, he found out that she was the daughter of the Lin family. At this time, he was already tired of Hua Jin and wanted to get rid of him. However, he still wanted to squeeze out the last bit of value he had left. Thus, he whispered a few words to Hua Jin. Chapter 2265. Hua Jin understood the meaning behind his words and nodded. Before he met her, he was a lowly money boy. In ancient times, a person like him would probably be the private pet of those rich and powerful people. No matter who appointed him, as long as he was given sufficient resources, he would have to submit to those people like a lapdog under the orders of his sugar daddy. He had resisted before, but the result was imprisonment and violent beatings without seeing the light of day. In the end, he was covered in scars and had to bow to those contemptuous mockery. In this world, the brighter the light, the deeper the darkness behind it. He envied those who walked in the light, but could only curl up in a dark corner and silently lick their wounds. Before he came into contact with this circle, he never knew that men could be played like this. In the face of power, how lowly could a person be? Ordinary people could not imagine how oppressive and painful those days were. It was a life worse than death. He was tired of such a dark and gloomy life. He was treated like a thing that could be bought and sold at will. His personality was lowly and his dignity was cheap, and he had to put on a smile to serve those unrestrained and ugly faces. But his sugar daddy had said that as long as he could settle this woman, he would be freed from such a dark life. He desperately wanted to get away from such a life. This woman gave him a glimmer of hope. After the banquet ended, he stood at the door and silently smoked a cigarette. When Lin Xia walked out of the door, she did not notice that someone was standing at the corner of the door. Hua Jin held her arm and pulled her into the corner. He held her shoulders and controlled her in this narrow space. Without saying much, he took the first step with his actions. He kissed her deeply. Lin Xia did not resist, either because she was close to him or because she was looking forward to such intimacy. Perhaps it was because he had just smoked, but there was a faint smell of tobacco on his lips. Lin Xia hated the smell of cigarettes, but unexpectedly, she did not feel repulsed by such a presumptuous kiss. Instead, she took the opportunity to hug him. When the kiss ended, Hua Jin smiled and asked, "Beautiful lady, would you like to have dinner with me?" His smile had a bewitching charm to it. She had failed to live up to her expectations and was head over heels for him. Even if she was reserved, she couldn't care less. It was as if his heart and soul were about to be taken away by the demoness. When they arrived at the hotel, they booked a presidential suite and spent the night making love. When they were done, he whispered into her ear, "Let me be your pet, okay?" Her whole soul and what little reserve she had left were led by the nose. For some reason, Lin Xia agreed. The next day, Hua Jin's sugar daddy came forward to negotiate with her. As for the conditions of the negotiation, it was naturally not something that could be measured with money. That man didn't lack money. He only lacked resources, and Lin Xia could give him such resources. After that, naturally, Hua Jin was privately kept by her and became her pet. After he got together with Lin Xia, his life had indeed undergone a drastic change. He finally moved out of that dark and gloomy basement dormitory. Chapter 2266. In that kind of dormitory, to be precise, even a dog could only wag its tail. Lin Xia rented a luxurious apartment in the city center for him. It had one bedroom and one living room, and it was a place for the two of them to spend time together. Before that, Lin Xia had never had a man by her side. Hua Jin was her first and only. She gave him lots of love, a house, a car, and even his debut in the entertainment industry later on. She was the one who pulled the strings. At the beginning, Lin Xia did not fall too deeply into this relationship. She repeatedly told herself to treat this as a game. Both parties were willing. She was clear about her mission. Her marriage was ultimately not up to her. When she was of age, she should follow her family's arrangements and marry another man. That man was probably from a wealthy family or a prestigious family. In any case, there would be no future between her and Hua Jin. Before that, she might as well play with the man she liked as she liked. It was not a bad idea to have some fun with him. But at the beginning, she had clearly told herself that. However, as the game progressed, she gradually fell too deeply into it. He was like a poppy. When she realized that she had fallen too deeply into it, it was already like drinking poison to quench her thirst. At that time, Lin Xia was a little afraid. At the end of this game, she would definitely be scarred, right? But even so, Lin Xia did not want to leave him even though she had the chance. She was a little indignant. She had already done her best, but why? From the beginning to the end, he looked indifferent. He did not even look at her. Even though every time he spoke those words of love to her, and when they were entangled, those tender feelings that numbed her to the bone were also good. But in the end, it was just an illusion. He did not love her. She was indignant. She had already fallen into the swamp. Her stubborn personality made her want to drag him down with her. She needed him, but did he not need her? Or did he not need her at all? Hence, when Lin Shuya walked into the ward that time and saw Hua Jin holding another woman's hand tightly, he finally broke into a smile. The melancholy on his face was gone, and in its place was joy and tenderness in his eyes. That bright and beautiful gaze pierced her deeply in that instant. On what basis? What right did she have to do everything in her power to win his favor? In the end, his gentle expression blossomed in front of another woman. Could it be that all the hard work she had put in was not enough to please him? Lin Shuya was finally enraged. That night, in the ward, it was as if she was possessed. She vented her anger by shouting those cruel and hurtful words at him. Men are indeed lowly. I treated you so well, but you didn't take it to heart. That woman only took care of you for a few nights, and you treat her so sincerely? Rong Jin, why do you have to ruin yourself like this? Do you think she treats you sincerely? She only sees you as a pitiful worm because she feels sorry for you. Such mockery was harsh, sharp, unbearable, and unbridled. Lin Shuya still remembered how Hua Jin hugged his battered body and curled up in a corner of the hospital bed. His head was lowered, and he did not say a word. It was only by chance that she caught a glimpse of a tear falling from the corner of his eye. Chapter 2267. However, Hua Jin forced a smile and said, "You don't have to apologize." Why? Because what you said is the truth. Hua Jin looked up and forced a smile on his face, but it was enough to make one's heart palpitate. Pathetic, despicable, lowly. All this while, I've been groveling to please all of you. Isn't that so? Lin Shuya was stunned. All of you treat me as your private property, as something that can be trampled on. However, she has always treated me as a human being, so, even if it's just a little bit of my self-esteem, she has at least given it to me. Just because I'm a cheap object, all of you can act so high and mighty in front of me without any scruples. Isn't it also because you covet the pleasure and warmth that I can give you and want to keep me by your side? That's why you're so nice to me, isn't it? However, she has never coveted anything from me and never expected to get anything from me. Perhaps such behavior may seem hypocritical to you, but at least I've found my dignity as a human being. Hua Jin smiled again. Perhaps dignity is something that you can easily get. However, to me, it's an extravagant hope. That's right. Dignity may seem cheap in Lin Shuya's eyes, but to him, it was so precious. Hence, he had been domineering and arrogant in the production team because he wanted to use this opportunity to regain his pitiful dignity. In this world, the strong preyed on the weak. She gradually came back to her senses. When Lin Shuya came back to her senses, she looked up and met Hua Jin's calm but cold eyes. She could no longer hold back her tears, and they overflowed. I'm sorry. I may have done a lot of things that hurt you and said a lot of things that hurt you, but I didn't mean it. Xiaoya, you and I are not compatible. Even if you insist, there's still no way for us to be together. Even if I love you, so what? Will your family accept a good-for-nothing like me? Lin Shuya exclaimed, You're not a good-for-nothing, at least in their eyes. Hua Jin took a deep breath and said coldly, I am. Lin Shuya didn't want to listen to him anymore. She covered her ears and shook her head helplessly. Shut up. Stop talking. Stop talking. If you love someone, you shouldn't force them, right? Shut up. You see, even now, you're still talking to me in a commanding tone. We've never been equal. Hua Jin didn't care about her breakdown. He smiled and said indifferently, I want to love you too, but I can't do it. Shut up. A scream echoed in the empty bathroom. Lin Shuya yanked Hua Jin's arm with such force that he was caught off guard and was dragged into the bathtub. Her slender body was submerged in the warm pool water. Stop talking. Lin Shuya's drenched body seized the opportunity and pressed him under her body. Hua Jin didn't seem to struggle at all. He allowed the water to submerge him, submerging his shoulders and chest. The warm water kept pouring into his eyes, nose, and ears, but he didn't struggle at all. He didn't move at all and even stopped breathing. Chapter 2268. It was a passionate kiss. You're the only one I have. Why are you abandoning me? When Yin Shishir woke up, it was already past noon. She opened her eyes and saw that the curtains in the bedroom had been opened. The warm afternoon sun shone through the clear floor-to-ceiling windows. Yin Shishir turned her head and saw that the other half of the bed was empty. Muyaja had already woken up. Why didn't he wake her up? Yin Shishir muttered to herself. She wanted to get out of bed, but the blanket was so warm that she was greedy. She thought to herself, I'd better stay in bed for a while. Thus, she turned around. However, the moment she turned around, she saw Yu Yu and Xiaoi Qin lying on the edge of the bed. One of their tender little faces looked adorable, while the other looked disgusted. The former was from Xiaoi Qin, while the latter was from a certain black-bellied little boy. Yin Shishir was so shocked that she almost choked. Mommy can really sleep. Little Qin faintly uttered these words. Yu Yu looked disgusted and said airily, Daddy is usually so busy. If Mommy continues to be so willful, Daddy will be squeezed dry sooner or later. Tongue. Yin Shishir's face instantly turned red. Yu Yu, what nonsense are you talking about? Was she the one who had misunderstood? She felt that Yu Yu's words had a deeper meaning. Moreover, these words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Squeeze dry. She couldn't imagine that this word had come out of Yu Yu's mouth. The point was, did he mean what she had imagined when he said squeeze dry? At the thought of this, Yin Shishir's face turned unreasonably red again. Xiaoi Qin comforted him. Yu Yu, don't worry. Daddy is so energetic. Even 10 mommies won't be able to squeeze him dry. Hey, Yin Shishir blushed and said unhappily, where did you learn these words? Xiaoi Qin snickered and said, Uncle taught us. Yin Shishir was confused. What did he teach you? Originally, we wanted to wake Mommy up earlier, but my uncle said not to wake you up too early. Daddy and Mommy must be busy until very late at night. I want you to rest more. Otherwise, Daddy won't be able to rest well. Uncle is afraid that Daddy will have kidney deficiency. In the future, Mommy's happiness will be at stake. The more Xiaoi Qin talked, the redder Yin Shishir's face became. A murderous look slowly appeared in her eyes. Poof! Yu Yu hurriedly covered Xiaoi Qin's mouth and scolded her angrily. How could you betray your uncle like this? The two little guys suddenly felt a gust of cold air and couldn't help but shiver. They snapped back to their senses and turned to see Yin Shishir sitting up on the bed. She clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. Gong Jia, this rascal. How dare he teach these two little guys such things that are not suitable for children? She got out of bed and changed her clothes. Without even washing her face and brushing her teeth, Yin Shishir stormed out of the bedroom. In the living room, Gong Jia was playing video games with Muyaja. When he looked up and saw Yin Shishir storming over, he smiled and said, Sis, you're awake. The next second, Yin Shishir pounced on him. She reached out and twisted his ear 180 degrees. Chapter 2269. Ow! Gong Jia covered his ears innocently and looked at her pitifully. Sister, you're being ridiculous. Why are you twisting my ears? Yin Shishir glanced at Muyaja from the corner of her eye. He was stunned by her murderous aura. She then reacted and pulled Gong Jia to the side. She lowered her voice and said, What kind of things did you teach them? Gong Jia was still confused and shook his head blankly. Yin Shishir punched him. Hurry up and tell me the truth. I really don't know. Gong Jia looked extremely innocent. His eyes were like those of a deer's, blinking repeatedly. It could melt one's heart. However, she didn't fall for it. Tell me the truth. Xiaoi Qin and Yu were hiding in the corner. They secretly watched this scene and felt satisfied. They smiled at each other and gave each other a high five. Poor Gong Jia had been pranked by these two black-bellied rascals. In reality, Gong Jia was really innocent. He wasn't the one who had instilled those words. Yu and Xiaoi Qin had just put the blame on him. Poor Gong Jia couldn't answer and was taught a lesson by Yin Shishir. Muyaja glanced at the two rascals who were hiding in the corner and laughing nonstop. He hooked his finger at them. The two rascals were like beasts that had been summoned. They eagerly went into his arms. Muyaja pinched their noses and questioned, What bad things have you done? Oh, we didn't do anything bad, Yu said self-righteously. Xiaoi Qin covered his mouth and snickered. Uncle is so wronged. He was pranked by Yu. Now, he can't clear his name even if he jumps into the Yellow River. Muya, on the other hand, had a clear mind. The three of them had a tacit understanding. After Yu explained a little, he roughly understood. Gong Jia was unlucky. A black pot flew from the sky and smashed on his face. In the end, Gong Jia did not understand why he offended Yin Shishir for no reason and was taught a lesson. Yin Shishir seemed to have realized something. She suddenly turned around and glanced at the two little kids in Muyaja's arms. She suddenly understood something, and her face darkened. You too, Mommy, you woke up so late. We're already being very nice to you by not complaining that you're lazy, Yu said with a smile. Yin Shishir felt guilty and stammered for a while. She did not have the courage to reprimand them. Poor Gong Jia. He took the blame and suffered for nothing. Where's Hua Jin? Yu said, Oh, Brother Hua Jin received a call. He said that he had something urgent to attend to, so he left first. Oh, Xiao Chen suddenly said with disdain, Mommy woke up so late. Luckily, Yu can cook. Otherwise, if we waited until Mommy woke up to cook, we would be so hungry that our souls would leave our bodies. Yin Shishir looked away guiltily and played dead. Gong Jia said, but then again, Yu's culinary skills are really impressive. I wonder who she inherited this talent from? As he said this, he quietly looked back and forth between Yin Shishir and Mu Yaja. Suddenly, he said, Positive from negative? Ahem. Yin Shishir cleared her throat awkwardly and explained, Actually, my culinary skills are not bad. You probably inherited this talent from me, right? Chapter 2270. Yu teased her, Mommy, don't you know how to be embarrassed when you say that? Yin Shishir waved her fist at him. Can you stop teasing me? Even if I don't tease you, you won't be able to hold the fort, Yu said coldly. Yin Shishir was speechless. Yu patted her shoulder sympathetically. Just like what Uncle said, negative is positive. Perhaps this is the reason why you and Daddy are two culinary idiots. I have an extraordinary sense of taste when it comes to food. Actually, I have to thank you and Daddy for this. Muyaja was speechless. He felt that he had been shot while lying down. Yin Shishir suddenly saw a platinum necklace on the sofa. She walked over and picked it up. She asked curiously, Whose necklace is this? Gong Jia shook his head. It's not mine. Yin Shishir looked around again. She didn't remember Yu and Xiao Chen having such a platinum necklace. It must have been left behind by Hua Jin. Yin Shishir picked up her cell phone and dialed Hua Jin's number in the shower room. It was quiet, and only the sound of Lin Shuia's suppressed and broken sobs could be heard. Even though she was trying to restrain herself, it wasn't difficult to hear the despair in her voice. Hua Jin was pinned under her as he stared blankly at the ceiling. His chest, which was exposed above the surface of the water, felt the warmth of her body. He didn't know if it was the water that was overflowing or her tears. The water in the bathtub flowed continuously and spilled onto the floor. The sound of water splashing was exceptionally clear in this quiet space. Hua Jin slowly closed his eyes. It wasn't that he was indifferent to her tears. However, her tears only made his heart ache. That was all. What was the saddest thing about humans? At least, to him, the saddest thing was that he would never fall in love with another woman in this lifetime. Love is nothing but the product of desire. He no longer had any expectations or illusions about love. Perhaps it was because he had been too tired for many years that he had lost the strength to love someone. Perhaps, if there was no such memory. If he and Lin Shuia had met normally and fell in love normally, perhaps he would have fallen in love with her regardless of everything. But now, he thought that he probably wouldn't believe in love and marriage anymore. Could it be that the fetters between people were not all linked together because of desire? Humans were the most selfish species. It was because of their selfishness that they loved themselves the most. Therefore, they would fall in love with a man or a woman who could satisfy their desires. Didn't Lin Shuya love him because he could satisfy all her desires? She was different from other girls. Some girls liked wealth and power, but she grew up in such a superior environment and had always been high and mighty. Therefore, she disdained those things that were almost at her fingertips, and his appearance just happened to satisfy her fantasies. Lin Shuya was like a little princess trapped in an ivory tower. Because of the restraints of her family, she always followed the rules. Everything followed the family's arrangements meticulously. She yearned to break through the secular world. He was just a psychological comfort, a dispensable substitute. How many people were like Yin Shir and Mu Yaja, like destined lovers? Chapter 2271. Xiaoya calmed down. He stroked her hair gently and said in a calm voice, "You said that you and I were just a game. Now, the game is over." Lin Shuya was stunned. That's right. Back then, when they were together, they made love that night. When she woke up, she said to him, "Play a game with me." There was no love, only a game of lust. He was like a pet that she kept by her side. However, she was too immersed in the game. What made her most indignant was that such an arrogant person like her had lowered herself and begged him to love her for his sake. Yet he could still say to her calmly, "Now, the game is over." Besides indignance, she felt more heartache and despair. Lin Shuya said stubbornly, "You can't live without me." She was the one who had taken care of his career. Ever since his debut, she had made use of her connections to invest in him. When he was still a newcomer, he took on a big production movie. Following that, he received many gold medal historical dramas. With one of the historical dramas, he became famous overnight. He went from being an 18th-tier actor to a first-tier historical actor. Apart from his exceptional good looks, it was also inseparable from her support. He couldn't leave her. In the entertainment industry, which was full of power, without her, he would fall overnight no matter how popular he was. When Hua Jin heard this, he smiled coldly and said casually, "I'll live well without you. I won't die." Such a light sentence had completely crushed her pride. "But I can't live without you," she cried and complained. "How am I going to live if I lose you? No one can't live without another. Maybe you won't be able to adapt at first, but after you leave." "I don't want to. I don't want to. Lin Shuya hugged him, reluctant to part with him. "Jean, don't leave me, okay?" Like a drowning person who was swaying on the sea and was grasping at the last straw, she forced a smile and said in a trembling voice, "Although I was expelled from my family, I can work hard with you. You continue to act and be a popular star. As for me, I will work hard. We will be like an ordinary couple. We will work hard for the future together. We will fight for tomorrow together. One day, we will be able to rely on our own abilities to have a place of our own in a city like this. I will work hard, very, very hard. For you, I am willing to suffer any hardship." Hua Jin was silent for a long time before he smiled helplessly. Life is not a game. Don't be childish. Yes, she had indeed given up her power and wealth for him. She had been willing to betray her family and be expelled from her home for him. She had sacrificed a lot. Even if she was sincere, how long could this kind of life last? It was no different from falling from a high place to the bottom of the valley and being smashed to pieces. If that was the case, she might learn to be an obedient girl for his sake. Every morning, she would eat a steamed bun or buy cheap breakfast from the roadside and squeeze into the subway. She would be like an ordinary girl, working from 9 to 5 and working hard for a few $1,000s a month. However, she definitely wouldn't be able to live such a life for too long. Chapter 2272. Humans were never equal to each other. From poverty to riches, a person's mind would become numb because of overnight riches. Because it came too easily, it would also be lost very quickly. As the saying went, virtue carries the world. So, what if one lost everything overnight? The transition was even more difficult. Lin Shuya was willing to do anything for him. But sooner or later, her blind impulses for him would be worn away by reality, and there would be nothing left of her. Working hard for the sake of tomorrow, like an ordinary person? What a joke. Just as he was about to speak, there were slight bubbles on the surface of the water. Something was vibrating in the pocket of his clothes. It was his cell phone. Hua Jin took out his cell phone from his pocket. Before he could see clearly who was calling, Lin Shuya snatched the cell phone away from him and glanced at the screen. On the screen, she saw the name Shir. Yin Shir, was it her? Lin Shuya bit her lip hard and questioned in a low voice, "Where did you go last night?" Hua Jin kept quiet. "Tell me." Lin Shuya threw the cell phone on the floor. The ringtone stopped ringing. Hua Jin's eyes suddenly had a tinge of anger. Pick it up. What? Lin Shuya widened her eyes. Right from the beginning, the man who was usually quiet and calm actually became like an enraged lion because of her act of venting. His gaze became sharp and fierce. Pick up his cell phone. You're angry? Lin Shuya questioned him. Who exactly is Yun Shishir? You're actually so angry because of her. Pick it up. Hua Jin seemed to be really angry. He stared at her with a vicious gaze. As if someone had touched his reverse scale, his face turned pale. Lin Shuya, enough is enough. This was the first time he had called her by her full name. Hua Jin seemed to be completely enraged and lost all his patience. How long are you going to be willful? Hua Jin smiled coldly. Do you know how painful it is for me to be with you? She obviously didn't love him, but she had to pretend to be deeply in love with him. Not only did she have to cooperate with him, but she also had to face threats and violence from his family. Is that enough? He suddenly stood up and gracefully stepped out of the bathtub. His calmness only served to accentuate her embarrassment and embarrassment. Lin Xia did not dare to believe that one day he would rebel against her. But now that it had happened before his eyes, he had no choice but to believe it. Lin Xia, if I let you off, can you let me off too? As Hua Jin spoke, he picked up the phone from the floor and wiped it carefully. Then, he left the bathroom without looking back. Lin Xia stood rooted to the ground in a daze, not reacting at all. After Hua Jin left the bathroom, there was a long period of silence. Then, she heard the sound of the door opening and closing. His heart skipped a beat with a thump. He's gone. He left without looking back. And she had been abandoned once again. She really had nothing left. Lin Shuya curled up and hugged her knees. She buried her face in the crook of her arms in despair and cried loudly. After Hua Jin changed his clothes and left the apartment, he stood in a secluded place and dialed a number. When the call was connected, a man's dignified and deep voice could be heard from the other end. Who's that? The father and daughter were really cut from the same cloth. They were equally arrogant. Chapter 2273. Hua Jin. The moment he heard this name, it was as if a bomb had exploded. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Bastard, you still have the guts to call me. Hua Jin moved the phone away from him with a look of disgust. He lit a cigarette and took a deep puff. However, because he took in too much, he choked. Cough, 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 he covered his mouth and coughed violently. The man's furious voice came from the other end of the phone. You despicable thing, I don't know where you came from, and I don't know what tricks you used to seduce my daughter. I didn't call you to listen to you lecture me. Hua Jin interrupted the man's incessant scolding. He paused for a moment, and without waiting for the other party to speak, he continued, Your daughter is in my apartment. I don't know what happened between you two, but I'll send you the address of the apartment immediately. You have to come and take her home. What trick are you playing now? Uncle, I swear to you that I'll cut all ties with her. Hua Jin sneered, but he still replied politely. Uncle, I swear to you that I'll cut all ties with her. However, the condition is that you have to discipline your daughter well. Tell her not to pester me, and I won't pester her either. I've already laid my cards on the table with her. As for her side, it's not something I can interfere with. However, I'll make it clear to you that I'll cut all ties with her. Whether it's the house or the car, I'll return everything she gave me to her. However, I hope that you can be merciful and stop disturbing my life. I have no intention of interfering with your relationship, so please give me some space. You. His words were straightforward and embarrassing. Lin Boxiong had always thought that Hua Jin and Lin Shuya's relationship was not consensual, but it was more likely that Hua Jin coveted his precious daughter's wealth and status. However, in the end, it was his daughter who kept pestering the other party. In the end, the other party filed a lawsuit and complained that his daughter caused trouble for him. What the hell was going on? She was not chaste at all. Discipline your daughter well. Tell her not to pester me again. Please don't disturb my life again. These two sentences had infuriated him to the point of bursting into flames. His unfilial daughter, what kind of shameful things did she do outside? Messing around with a man and a woman was a disgrace to him. Fortunately, the matter had not spread. Otherwise, the Lin family's reputation would have been ruined by him. A girl who kept pestering and chasing after a man. Now that things had come to this point, She was still pestering him. Where did she put the family? Could it be that she was mesmerized by his beauty? On the other end, Huajin said sensibly, "Uncle, don't worry. I'll keep my mouth shut about this matter. Send the address over." Okay. I put the key to the apartment in the mailbox at the door. After hanging up the call, Huajin sucked in a deep breath of cold air and sent his apartment's address over via text message. Everything was over. No, he was finally. Lin Shuya cried until she was tired. Coupled with the fact that she had not slept the whole night, she was so exhausted that she fell asleep in the bathtub. She woke up when she heard the sound of the key unlocking the door. Chapter 2274. Lin Xia jumped out of the bathtub agitatedly. She did not care that she was drenched and dragged her wet body all the way to the shower room. However, as soon as he opened the door, he saw the door open and a group of people in black suits walked in. Lin Xia shrieked. They were no strangers to Lin Xia. They were the bodyguards of the Lin family. Could it be Lin Xia was still in a daze when she saw Lin Boxiong walking in with a sullen face? When he stepped through the door, he saw Lin Xia standing there with her clothes disheveled. She had been soaking in the bathtub all this time. Not only was she drenched, but her clothes were also completely drenched. Therefore, she looked extremely disheveled. Lin Xuya's heart sank when she saw Lin Boxiong. Her thoughts were in a mess, and she could not figure out what was going on. "Dad, why are you here?" It was fine if she did not speak. The moment she spoke, Lin Boxiong was furious, especially when he saw her in such an unsightly state. Her wet clothes clung to her graceful body. So many of her sensitive parts were faintly discernible. Lin Boxiong glared at the people behind him. The bodyguard behind him knew how to read people's expressions and immediately turned their backs. "Get out. Wait for me outside." Yes. The bodyguards filed out and closed the door. Only Lin Boxiong and Lin Xuya were left in the spacious entryway. "Dad, why are you here?" Lin Xuya mumbled. She did not have much confidence in her voice. If she was not in such a disheveled state, she might have been able to raise her chin and speak. But now, she just wanted to find a corner and hide. She did not want him to see her in such a sorry state. Lin Boxiong's sudden appearance had completely messed up her mind. How did he get the key to the apartment? Only Huajin, and she had the key to the apartment. Could it be? The moment she thought that it might be Huajin who lured her father here, Lin Xuya felt that the world was spinning. It was not a light blow. Lin Boxiong heard this sentence. Lin Boxiong's expression changed again and again, and the veins on his forehead bulged. He suddenly strode forward and slapped her wet face. Smack! A vicious slap came from the palm wind. Lin Xuya didn't have the chance to dodge and took the slap. Her face was slapped to the side, and she took a few steps back. She was stunned for a while before she resentfully raised her hand. When her fingertips touched her burning cheek, she was startled. "Shameless bastard! You still have the face to acknowledge me as your father." Lin Boxiong's thunderous roar shook the small entryway, causing it to rumble. Lin Xuya's head buzzed. Her vision turned black and white. She felt so wrong that she wanted to cry, but she couldn't shed a single tear. "Look at yourself. Now, lower your head and look at yourself. Do you still have the face to call me Dad?" Lin Boxiong glared at her in exasperation. If it weren't for her delicate body, and if she were his son, he would have flown into a rage out of humiliation. He would have picked up a stick and given her a good thrashing. Was it not enough for her to humiliate herself? Did she have to humiliate the Lin family before she was satisfied? Chapter 2275. Yeah, how could I forget that I was chased out of the Lin family's house yesterday? Now, I don't think I have a right to acknowledge you. You. Lin Boxiong was infuriated by her stubbornness. His chest heaved with anger, and after a while, he gritted his teeth and said, Xuya, how badly do you want to humiliate yourself before you come to your senses? How am I humiliating myself? Lin Boxiong was so angry that he couldn't speak. He resisted the urge to slap her and sneered. How do you think I found this place? Lin Xuya's eyes widened in shock. She heard Lin Boxiong's cruel voice. It's all because that gigolo of yours called me, and told me that he was determined to cut all ties with you. That's when I found out that it wasn't his wishful thinking to be with you. Do you know what he said? That man said that he hoped that you would stop pestering him. He said that as long as you gave him the car or the house, he would return them in full. Moreover, he would completely cut ties with you. He even told me to teach you a lesson and not to pester him anymore. Tell me, how did you humiliate yourself to this extent? How could such a lowly thing humiliate you to this extent? Shuya, it's time for you to wake up. When Lin Xia heard that, she cried hysterically, Impossible. He wouldn't say that. Is it you? Did you force him to say something like that? I forced him. Lin Boxiong retorted coldly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. I forced him. Shuya, he didn't even care about you. It was all your wishful thinking from the start. If he hadn't sent me the address, how do you think I would have found this place so quickly? My face has been completely thrown away by you. Take advantage of the fact that things haven't gotten out of hand yet. Come home with me and apologize to Grandpa. In the future, cut all ties with that *TCH and don't get close to him. Lin Xia fell to the ground, her eyes empty as she muttered, Impossible. Impossible. How affectionate do you think he is to you? She was just playing with you, but you actually took it for real. Are you done fooling around? Come back with me. No, I'll say it one last time. Come home with me. Lin Xia stood up abruptly and shouted at the top of her lungs, No, you. Lin Boxiong was furious again. You unfilial daughter. He turned around, opened the door, and said in a deep voice, Bring her back. The bodyguards nodded and walked in. One of them held one of Lin Xuya's arms while the other wrapped her in a suit jacket. Ignoring her struggles, he hit her on the back of her neck and knocked her out. Lin Xuya's vision went dark. In her daze, her mind was filled with Hua Jin's resolute expression. Naturally, they were experienced and familiar with the technique. After Lin Xuya was knocked unconscious, she was forcefully brought back to the Lin family. Lin Xuya, I'll let you go. Can you let me go too? Rong Jin, how can you be so cold? At the hospital, after being in a coma for 2 days and 2 nights, Song Yunxi finally woke up. Chapter 2276. Song Yinya had been lying on the edge of the bed, watching over her brother all night. When she sensed movement on the bed, she raised her head abruptly and was excited to see Song Yunxi awake. Brother, you're awake. Song Yunxi looked at her. Just as she was about to speak, she pulled at the wound at the corner of her lips and sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. Brother, don't move. You're seriously injured. Song Yinya held his hand tightly in heartache. She was full of guilt towards Song Yunxi. If she had not caused trouble, he would not have lost control and gone to the Gu family. The day after Song Yunxi was hospitalized, the Gu family sent someone to call and send over the bill for Song Yunxi's expenses at the private clubhouse that day, as well as a list of the items in the clubhouse, asking for compensation. Gu Jinglian was quite domineering in this aspect. Originally, Song Zhengguo was still investigating which faction had beaten his son to such a state. Unexpectedly, Gu Jinglian had sent someone to call and give a summary of what had happened that night. In the end, not only did he righteously ask Song Zhengguo to compensate for all the damage done to the clubhouse, he even mocked Song Yunxi, that brat, is so arrogant that he actually asked the Gu family to step in for the Song family. What a joke. Song Zhengguo was so angry that he vomited blood. Only then did Song Enya and Jiang Qiming know that Song Yunxi had gone to the Gu family because she was indignant on behalf of her sister, hoping that the Gu family could help the Song family get back at them. In the end, she offended Gu Jinglian and ended up being beaten to such a state. Song Enya, in particular, was filled with regret when she heard all this. If she had not been a burden, her brother, father, and mother would not have ended up in such a state. Jiang Qimeng was heating porridge when she heard Song Yunxi's surprised cry. She turned around and saw that Song Yunxi had regained consciousness. Nervously, she came forward and sat down by the bed. Yunxi, you're finally awake. God bless you. God bless you. Song Yunxi, after a brief moment of confusion, he finally realized where his body was and his eyes turned cold. Seeing that he did not speak, Jiang Qiming glanced at Song Enya worriedly and signaled with her eyes. Song Inya immediately understood. She held Song Yunxi's hand and asked gently, "Brother, how do you feel? Do you want some water? Or would you like some apples? I'll peel it for you." Before she could finish speaking, Song Yunxi's overly cold reaction caused her to stop talking. Song Yunxi looked at her expressionlessly for a long time, but the look in his eyes became colder and colder. Suddenly, he gently pulled his hand out of her hand, looking extremely cold. Song Inya was stunned, clearly in disbelief. Song Yunxi had never treated her like this before. He had always doted on her like she was the apple of his eye. However, his reaction at this moment was so cold that it made one's heart palpitate. "Brother, what's wrong? Don't touch me." Song Yunxi turned around angrily. Even though it was difficult for him to turn around in his current condition, he did not seem to want to see her. He did not even want to say a word to her. Song Inya's heart ached when she saw his cold expression, and she retracted her hand resentfully. Looking at his cold back view, Song Inya's eyes could not help but turn red. She choked and said, "Brother, are you angry with me? I don't want to hear your voice." Chapter 2277. Yunxi. Jiang Qimeng was frightened when she heard that. She hurriedly went forward and covered Song Yunxi's mouth. "You're seriously injured. Don't move around anymore. Lie on the bed properly. If you want anything, tell me. Okay? Don't talk nonsense." Song Yunxi gritted her teeth and suppressed her anger. She took a deep breath and finally calmed down. At the side, Song Inya lowered her head guiltily. Her eyes were already moist. Song Yunxi's words pierced her ears and pierced her heart. However, she did not blame him for saying such ruthless words. It was all her fault. She had been blinded by her wishful thinking. However, she knew that she was wrong. In the future, she would not do such a stupid thing. Song Inya's eyes were red. She opened her mouth a few times, but she hesitated. Did her brother hate her? Was that why he didn't say a word to her? He must be disappointed in her, right? With her back facing Song Inya, Song Yunxi said to Jiang Qimeng in a low voice, "Mom, I don't feel well. I want to sit up and not lie down." "Yunxi," Jiang Qimeng looked at him hesitantly. After pondering for a long time, she comforted him. "Just lie down like this. You're seriously injured now. It's not convenient for you to sit up." Song Yunxi finally realized that something was wrong with his body. He kept feeling that the numbness in many parts of his body was a little strange. He tried to sit up, but the moment he moved, a piercing pain instantly suffocated him. His hand trembled as he touched his chest. However, the moment he lifted his hand, he was shocked by the heart-wrenching pain. "Mom," Jiang Qimeng immediately said, "Yunxi, you've just had surgery. Don't move around. Otherwise, if the incision splits, you'll suffer again." "Surgery?" Song Yunxi was a little surprised and turned pale with fright. What happened to me?" Seeing that she could not hide it anymore, Jiang Qimeng recounted his injuries. There were many fractures all over his body, including his ribs and shoulders, intracranial hemorrhage, moderate concussion. Song Yunxi's eyes turned cold when she heard this. With such serious injuries, then that would mean that his career in the team had come to an end. His father had spent a lot of money to get him into the military. As long as he persevered for a few more years, he would be able to achieve meteoric success and have a bright future. However, once he retired from the army and returned home at this critical juncture, all the sacrifices he had made over the years would all turn into smoke and vanish into thin air. How did this happen? Song Yunxi bit his lips hard, his eyes turning red from anger and unwillingness to accept the situation. Song Inya suddenly went to him and knelt before him, crying bitterly. "Brother, it's all my fault. I was insensible. I shouldn't have done such a ridiculous thing. In the end, I implicated the Song family in you. I know I'm wrong. I'll never do it again." Inya, Jiang Qimeng hurriedly went to help her. "What's the use is an apology?" The more Song Yunxi listened, the more the veins on his forehead bulged. He frowned and yelled at her. "What's the point of apologizing? Song Inya, are you satisfied now? The Song family has been ruined by you. Father was destroyed by you, and I was also destroyed by you. Are you satisfied now? Are you happy now? Why are you crying again? Now that you're happy and have your wish fulfilled, shouldn't you be laughing out loud? Chapter 2278. Jiang Qiming cried as she stopped him. She held his wrist tightly, hoping that he would calm down. Yunxi, don't spout nonsense. How am I spouting nonsense? Song Yunxi pushed her hand away angrily, ignoring the injuries on his body. Even though his wounds were showing signs of opening due to this violent movement, he did not seem to feel pain and said coldly, "Am I not telling the truth?" Jiang Qiming's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. Song Yunxi sneered. "Even now, you're still protecting her. Mom, I don't pity her at all. Inya, you still have the cheek to cry at this point? What about me? Are you satisfied that I've come to this?" Since she was young, everyone in the family doted on and protected her. But in the end, our good intentions were treated as ill intent. Our love for her can't even compare to that heartless man. For that man, she ignored the family's interests and threw herself into the fire like a moth. But in the end, weren't we the ones who followed behind her and cleaned up the mess for her? How naive is a girl to want to get pregnant with that man's child at all costs? She even used such a despicable method. I really don't have the face to acknowledge this disappointing sister. What about now? Is she satisfied? Are you satisfied? In order to protect her reputation, father actually ceded that piece of land in Xiancheng to Mu Yaja. Do you know what this means? Song Inya finally could not take it anymore. She wailed and covered her face as she cried bitterly. "Brother, stop talking. I know I was wrong. I've harmed you, Dad, and the Song family. I'll make it up to you. I'll make it up to you." Song Yunxi smiled in despair. "How do you want to make it up to me? How can you make it up to me? Things have already come to this point. Can you compensate the Song family for their losses?" Song Inya cried helplessly like a child. She reached out to hold her brother's hand. "Get lost!" Song Yunxi shouted. "I don't want to see you. Get lost." "Brother, scram." When Jiang Qiming heard this, she hugged Song Yunxi with heartache and gave Song Inya a look. Suppressing her indignation, she turned around and quietly left the room. Outside the door, she sat down on the bench in the corridor, her head lowered, and she hugged her shoulders helplessly. After Jiang Qiming comforted Song Yunxi to sleep, she walked out of the ward, sat down beside her, and handed her a cup of hot tea. "Inya, your brother said those words because he was confused. Don't take it to heart. Yunxi, he still loves you very much." She nodded. "I know, don't be sad. You're pregnant now, so don't be too emotional. Try to control yourself. It'll be bad if the baby is affected. From tomorrow onwards, I'll stay in the hospital to take care of Yunxi. You just need to recuperate at home," Jiang Qiming instructed as she gently patted her daughter's back. Song Inya clenched her fists tightly. All of a sudden, because of this series of events, she hated Mu Yaja to the core. The amount of love one had for a person, once it turned into hatred, it would be hatred that seeped into the bones. Loving him was the most humble thing she had ever done. Ever since they were young, the two of them had been inseparable. During her youth, he had occupied the most important part of her life. Chapter 2279. She thought that Brother Mu liked her, too. The only reason he avoided her was because of social norms. However, she had been quietly working hard to get close to him and enter his heart until she saw the man she loved standing with another woman. Yin Shir was so good about this woman. She racked her brains for a long time, but still could not figure out what she had lost to her. In terms of family background, she came from a prestigious family and was high and mighty, but that woman was just a commoner with no power or influence. In terms of looks, Song Inya did not think that she was inferior in any way. Looks would eventually wither with time. So what if she was so beautiful? In terms of personality, she was also gentle and considerate. Moreover, she should be the one who understood Brother Mu the most. However, she was looking forward to him changing his mind, but she did not expect the man she loved to get closer and closer to another woman. She was indignant. So she took an unconventional approach later on. She could not figure it out. She really could not figure it out. They were both pregnant. So why was Yin Shir able to get his approval because of the two children? Why couldn't she? She had to admit that this unconventional action was completely imitating her own actions. Back then, Yin Shishir gave birth to 2 children for Brother Mu as a surrogate. After that, the two of them could get closer to each other because of the children. So why couldn't she? In order to have this child, she had put in a lot of effort and paid a huge price. She had risked everything and embezzled her father's assets. In order to successfully get pregnant, she had endured a lot of pain. Every night, she had to beg the heavens for their blessings and blessings so that she could successfully get pregnant. Finally, the heavens did not disappoint those who persevered. She was finally pregnant with his child. However, in the end, he casually said that he had already tampered with this operation. She was like a monkey being played, or even a clown. She had no idea that her actions were already under his control. She was as naive as a fool and allowed herself to be manipulated by him. By the time she came to her senses, it was already too late. Now that she thought about it, her actions were pitifully stupid. She hated it. I hate him to the bone. She clenched her fists in anger as her tears fell one by one onto her body. Regret, hatred, and pain were entrenched in his heart. She couldn't accept it. She really couldn't accept it. Now that her brother had become like this, she was partly responsible for it. If it wasn't for her, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Calm down, Inya. Jiang Qiming hugged her daughter anxiously and consoled her patiently. Since I can see that you've thought things through and seen through that man, then you should give up on him. He abandoned you. So what's the point of thinking about him? What you need to do now is to quietly recuperate, and when the time comes, climb up the pole. However, this is a blessing in disguise. With this child, at least we have one last bargaining chip in our hands. What do you mean? Your child is Mu Yanqing's. That lad is very likely to be the future head of the Mu family. If you're pregnant with his child, that'll truly be a mother relying on her son. So, you don't have to think about those trivial things now. Take good care of your body and raise the child in your belly well. That's the most important thing. The most important thing right now. Chapter 2280. Song Inya wanted to say something, but hesitated. She opened her mouth a few times, but was too embarrassed to speak. What's wrong? Jiang Qiming looked at her in surprise. Haven't you thought it through, or are you unwilling? Song Inya remained silent. Jiang Qiming continued to persuade her. Look at how that woman bullied you and trampled you under her feet. Now, she's obviously waiting to see you make a fool of yourself. Are you willing to let her laugh at you like this? After a pause, she continued. Do you think I'm bad for you? Of course, I hope that you can lead a good life. Although Mu Yanqing isn't the head of the family in name yet, Mu Linfeng has the intention of supporting him to this position. Is Mu Linfeng arranging a marriage for him? You should know that Mu Linfeng is definitely the head of a big family like the Mu family. What does it mean that he can personally arrange a marriage for Mu Yanqing? This means that Mu Linfeng values him and wants to groom him. That's why he's putting in so much effort to support him. If you two succeed, the songs will add fuel to the fire, and Mu Yanqing will naturally become the head of the family in no time. When that time comes, you'll be the glorious young mistress of the Mu family. This means that the songs will be able to make a comeback. When you become the matriarch of the Mu family, who will look down on you? Yin Shishir, on the other hand, bet on the wrong thing. Yaja stepped down from his position and became a pauper with nothing. What good life can she have with that man? You, on the other hand, will be glorious after marrying into the Mu family. It'll be her turn to look up to you and be envious of you. When that time comes, won't she be trampled under your feet? Song Inya was moved by her words. That's right. Anyway, love had long become a thing of the past for her. She no longer thought about it or missed it. She might as well seize the opportunity and go with the flow. Jiang Qiming sighed again and said, You're all grown up now. There are some things that I want to tell you. When you find a man, you must find someone who loves you. A woman should still take herself seriously. Yaja, that child, is stubborn. Once he recognizes what he wants, he'll always act on his own. I admit that he's very outstanding, but what did you get in return for chasing after him? No matter how good a gift was, men would never treat it as a big deal. If you and Yanqing can be together, it's fine even if you don't have feelings for him. You don't love him and he doesn't love you. But this relationship can be nurtured in the future. Love is just a pastime. Now that you've let go, It's time to think about your future. So what if you're together with Yaja? He doesn't have any power or influence, and your close friends will only look down on you even more. Things are different now that you're with Mu Yinqing. Once you become the young mistress of the family, people will definitely be envious of you. Do you to be the one who is to be looked to be the one who is to be the envy of others? It's all up to your whim. There's nothing. You should rejoice that you've come to your senses in time and are no longer obstinate. 2. What do you mean? Chapter 2281. This question was a test for Jiang Qiming. She pondered for a while, only to hear Song Inya's nagging. Mu Yinqing will definitely find it ridiculous and think that I'm shameless. Besides, didn't you say that the Mu family is arranging a marriage for him? I heard that Uncle Mu has set his eyes on the Lin family's third daughter, Lin Shuya. If I take the initiative to look for him, won't I just be throwing myself at him? After a pause, she continued reluctantly. Besides, if I say that I'm pregnant with his child, it's another matter whether he'll believe me or not. He hasn't even touched me before. If his child appeared out of nowhere in my stomach, he'll definitely think that I'm ridiculous. I don't want that to happen. She took a deep breath and smiled bitterly. Besides, I've already done 2 paternity tests. If I do a third time, I'm afraid that I won't be able to keep the child. Mom, it wasn't easy to get this child. I don't want to take the risk. If I lose this child, who knows how much suffering the next one will have to go through. Mom, what should I do? I'll think of another way. Jiang Qiming frowned and comforted her as she fell into deep thought. Just as Song Inya was hesitating, she heard a hint of excitement appear on her mother's face. You said that you've never interacted with him before. Yes. Then, can't we just create an opportunity for intimate contact? Jiang Qiming said matter-of-factly. Huh? Song Inya could not figure out what her mother was thinking. Jiang Qiming said, I heard that Mu Yinqing is a well-behaved man on the surface, but he has played with many women outside. You should be frequenting places like nightclubs and bars. When this matter with Yunxi is over, I'll find an opportunity to make some arrangements, and this matter will naturally come to fruition. Jiang Qiming did not seem to realize how despicable her method was. Song Inya was also bewitched by her words and asked, What's the plan? You'll know when the time comes. Can't you say it now? She was a little unhappy. Mom, if you want me to cooperate, why don't you say it now? It's good to let me be mentally prepared. Don't be caught off guard when the time comes. I've already told you. Don't feel awkward and refuse to cooperate when the time comes. Jiang Qiming paused for a moment before she told him the idea she had in mind. So that was what she was thinking. Doesn't Mu Yinqing frequent nightclubs? When the time came, she would arrange for some people to deliberately get him drunk or spike his drink with ecstasy. Then, they would bring him to the hotel and let him share a room with her. Then, he would do some tricks. When he woke up at dawn and saw Song Inya sharing a bed with him, he would naturally suspect that he had slept with her because he was drunk last night. Wouldn't that give him a good reason to do so? In that case, the child would naturally have a solid foundation. When the time came, he would naturally be able to negotiate with Mu Yinqing with his conditions. Given the Song family's status and background, as long as they were willing to negotiate terms with him, Mu Yinqing would eventually agree. Song Inya's face flushed red when she heard this. She felt that what Jiang Qiming did was no different from selling her out. But now that things had developed to this point, she couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. Chapter 2282. Song Inya nodded hesitantly and muttered, I got it. You can make the arrangements when the time comes. Anyway, just tell me what to do, and I'll cooperate. Inya, that's a good girl. Jiang Qiming was satisfied with her understanding. What about Lin Shuya then? Song Inya suddenly raised her doubts. The Lins and the Songs are of similar status. Most importantly, the Lins are also a prestigious family with a strong background. Mu Yinqing will definitely lean toward them. When the time comes, what if he insists on having Lin Shuya and not me? You're already pregnant with his child. When the time comes, he won't be able to make excuses. Jiang Qiming did not care. She had interacted with Lin Shuya a few times. She was proud and arrogant and would not take Mu Yinqing seriously. Mu Yinqing would only be bullied by her. When the time came, she would gather some evidence and find something against Lin Shuya to throw in front of Mulinfo. When the time came, she would have the capital to negotiate. Moreover, they were already pregnant. The Mu family valued heirs the most. A mother's status would rise because of her son. This trick was tried and tested. With Mu Yinqing's child, she would have full confidence. At the thought of this, Jiang Qiming patted her shoulder reassuringly and said, "You don't have to worry about the rest. Do as I say. I definitely won't harm you. You just have to think about how to be an elegant young mistress of the Mu family. From today onwards, you can't be as spoiled as before. Stay at home and learn some red tape. These will come in handy when you enter the Mu family. Since you've already made up your mind, it's time for you to focus." Although the plan had not been implemented yet, Jiang Qiming had already taught her how to be a young mistress of the Mu family. Song Yinya nodded and clenched the corner of her shirt. She pursed her lips, but her thoughts were complicated. Her heart for Mu Yaja was already dead. All that was left was hatred and hatred for him. Since she had set her goal, she could only continue to pursue it without hesitation. As for the old and new grudges, she would settle them all once she stepped into the Mu family's door. At the thought of this, the corners of her lips curled up into a cold and eerie smile. It was a fulfilling and happy new year until the 15th day of the first lunar month. Yun Shishir's days were peaceful and comfortable. Without the hassle of work, this new year was incomparably comfortable. On the second day of a new year, she and Mu Yaja brought along the two Xiaobao girls and went to the Maldives for a holiday. It wasn't until the moment she boarded the plane that she found out that a certain meticulous man had already planned this vacation. The plane tickets and hotel were all booked a month in advance. New Year was the peak season for tourism in the Maldives. Many of the hotels were overcrowded, and the demand could not meet the demand. For this reason, Mu Yaja booked a 5-star hotel and first-class tickets a month in advance, taking the lead in seizing the golden resources of the holiday. But he had never mentioned it to her. On the morning of the second day of the new year, he woke her up with a morning exercise that was good for her physical and mental health. In the aftertaste of their lovemaking, he whispered in her ear, "Pack your luggage right away. We're going on a vacation." Yin Shishir was surprised. "Where are we going?" The man smiled mysteriously and slightly curled his lips. "The Maldives. The Maldives. Oh God." Chapter 2283. The blue sky, the endless sea, the clear water, and even the hotel under the sea. Every time she thought of these, she felt a surge of emotions. She had always wanted to go to the Maldives, but she had never had the time. More importantly, she had gone abroad once, and it was especially troublesome. Hence, she had only had beautiful fantasies about the Maldives and had never had the chance to go. She had not expected this man to give her such a surprise. But how would she know? Mu Yaja knew that she had always dreamed of going to the Maldives because he had flipped through her diary. He was fulfilling all the wishes she had written down. The Maldives was just one of her dreams. However, on the plane, Mu Yaja glanced at Gong Jie, who was sitting beside Yu Yu and leisurely flipping through financial magazines. He was in a bad mood. "Why is he following us?" Yin Shishir said awkwardly. Well, Gong Jie seemed to have heard Mu Yaja's unhappy question. He smiled and said, "It's not a honeymoon. Why can't I tag along?" Yu Yu looked up and glanced at the unhappy man. Then, she looked at Gong Jie, who was smiling wickedly. She raised her eyebrows. Xiao Chen said quietly, "Uncle, Daddy is disdaining you for shamelessly tagging along to be a third wheel." "Third wheel?" Gong Jie did not take it to heart. He pinched his cheeks and snorted coldly. "If I'm a third wheel, aren't the two of you spoiling the fun too? Why can the two of you tag along, but I can't?" Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Because we are Mommy's little tails. Mommy won't be able to shake us off no matter what." Yu Yu asked curiously, "Then what's Uncle?" Xiao Chen smiled and said, "I'm the head of the third wheel." Gong Jie was speechless. Head of the third wheel? What kind of stupid term was that? Yin Shishir was so amused that her stomach hurt from holding back her laughter. Gong Jie gave her a bitter look. "Sis," she was still smiling. Yin Shishir forced herself to hold back and smiled. "Xiao Jie, since you're here, I'll leave these two kids to you." "What?" Xiao Yiqin giggled and couldn't help but say, Uncle has changed from a third wheel to a nanny. Get lost. Gong Jie proudly turned his face away and expressed his stance. I'm here for a vacation, not to be a nanny. Wherever Big Sister goes, I will go too. Mu Yaja's face darkened. What a killjoy. He didn't know what kind of method this kid had used. She clearly didn't book his ticket, but he was actually able to board the plane in such a grand manner. Gong Jie, however, laughed. What a joke. This airline company was controlled by Hurricane Group. Hurricane Group started out as a smuggler. As their territory expanded, they gradually expanded into sea transportation, air transportation, and land transportation. Out of the top 10 airlines in the world, Hurricane Group controlled 5 of them. As the crown prince of Hurricane Group, it was easy for him to book a plane. He was still keeping a low profile. If he had asked to book a plane, the passengers on the plane, including that annoying brother-in-law of his, would have been chased off the plane and obediently waited at the airport for the next flight. He was being merciful. Book a plane ticket. What a joke. Chapter 2284. Yu thought to himself, Daddy will surely feel aggrieved if he finds out about this, but there's nothing I can do about it. Who asked him to choose this airline? Who asked the private airline under his name to be temporarily frozen because of the Mu Group? He was lucky that his passport was not frozen. However, even if his uncle kicked his dear and adorable father off the plane, he would still carry his father up again. The Maldives Islands, the necklace that God had sprinkled on earth, was the last paradise in the Indian Ocean. The Republic of Maldives was located in South Asia. It was an island country consisting of more than 1,200 small coral islands, 202 of which were inhabited. Since there was a rainy season from May to September, it was the best season to travel from October to April. Before the registration, Gong Jie suggested that they go to the Huvefin Fusher Hotel. Hence, Muyaja changed the hotel at the last minute and upgraded it to a 7-star hotel. Alas, Muyaja's face, which had just relaxed a little, darkened at the sight of his nephew. Was he a dogskin plaster? I will go wherever my sister goes. She was on his bed. Did this guy want to sleep with her too? Yu glanced at Muyaja's expression and knew that Daddy was unhappy. Hence, he tugged at Gong Jie's sleeve and said in a low voice, Uncle, you can't ruin Daddy and Mommy's trip this time. You can't ruin it. Ruin it? Ruin it? Gong Jie snorted and said arrogantly, I don't have time for that. Then why are you sticking to me? Yu asked cautiously. Don't tell me you're going to hunt for girls. Gong Jie bit his straw and curled his lips coldly. Boring. Uncle, how many days of annual leave did the Hurricane Group give you? Why do you look like you have nothing to do? The annual performance target has been reached. I have half a month of annual leave this year. Oh, Yu suddenly took the drink from his hand and took a sip. She warned, Anyway, you'd better behave during this trip and not cause any trouble. It's rare for Mommy to go on a trip. Don't disturb her mood. Woo! Gong Jie narrowed his eyes pitifully and complained, You're biased. How am I biased? Gong Jie felt wronged. I'm your uncle. I love you so much, but you're protecting your daddy. He paused and spread his hands. I gave you that island for free. Give it back. Yu said in disdain. How can you take back what you've given away? Shameless. You have no conscience. The gifts you gave me were all one-sided. I didn't force you or blackmail you. There's no reason to take it back. Xiao Yiqin also persuaded impatiently. That's right, uncle. Men should be gentlemanly. Gong Jie was speechless. However, under the pressure of Yu and Xiao Yiqin, Gong Jie finally promised that he wouldn't cause any trouble during this trip. The 5 of them were divided into 2 groups and were free to move around. Muyaja and Yun Shishir went to the Lotus Flower Powder Island. Gong Jie and Little Yiqin, on the other hand, went to another island. When they were about to get off the plane, Yu suddenly thought of something and asked curiously, Uncle, aren't you bringing bodyguards with you on this trip? No need. What? Chapter 2285. That's because I have Xiao Yiqin. No way. Yu pulled Xiao Yiqin into his camp and emphasized, Xiao Yiqin is my personal bodyguard. Uncle, don't covet him. I'm not afraid. Gong Jie said proudly. I bought the island we're going to 2 years ago. All the facilities on the island, including the hotel, bar, and resort, are under my name. Yu did not listen to him, though. Instead, he turned to Little Chin and reminded him, "Remember this. Uncle is a super dangerous person. The number of people who want to assassinate him can line up from here to Paris. If anything happens, you take me with you and run. If necessary, keep a distance from him so that you don't get caught up in it." Little Chin nodded solemnly at h's father's serious explanation. Gong Jie frowned when he heard this. He grabbed Yu Yu's ear and complained, "Why are you so heartless?" Yu Yu sneered, "I'm telling the truth." What he said was not false at all. Hurricane Group was the world's largest arms group and was known as the Empire of Terror. Gong Jie, as the chief commander of the North American and European markets, was known as the Merchant of Death. He owned more than 100 cargo planes and more than 50 supercargo ships. He controlled more than 1,200 shipping routes around the world and was fluent in 6 languages. He could be said to be the most important person in Hurricane Group. Danger was always lurking around him. Not only that, but he was also blacklisted by many governments. He even made it to the top 10 of the FBI's wanted list. In that case, he was indeed a terrorist. Some time ago, he had offended many leaders of terrorist organizations in order to expand his territory and get a share of the pie. He was in charge of the European and North American markets, but he had extended his ambition to the African market. In the past 3 years, Gong Jie had made use of the intelligence agency's resources and operations to reach a transaction agreement. He had almost monopolized the majority of the market's profits from 32 battles of various sizes in 29 African countries and earned countless profits. The profits were enough to make many people jealous. Last year, he had hundreds of billions of dollars worth of orders under his name and became the leader of Hurricane Group. Of course, it was enough to make people jealous. Gong Xiaoying was dissatisfied. Every market had its own person in charge. The African market had always been under someone else's charge. Gong Jie was breaking the rules by meddling in other markets. Gong Jie said coldly, "The African market is the most fertile market, but it has been unable to meet the target for many years. Hurricane Group doesn't need such a useless person in charge. I am doing this because I want to prove that the African market has the highest potential." Gong Xiaoying was left speechless by her words. In his eyes, his son was extraordinary. There are not many people who could gain his approval, but Gong Jie was definitely one of them. However, although Gong Xiaoying did not approve of his actions, he also recognized his talent. Therefore, for a long time after that, Gong Xiaoying sent 5 more mercenary groups to protect him. But in fact, Gong Jie had offended more than that. From the European governments to the terrorist organizations, there were too many organizations that had put him on the wanted list. No wonder Yu Yu described him as a dangerous person. Chapter 2286. The group arrived at the island. On the other side, Yin Shishir and Mu Yaja had also settled down at the hotel. After checking in, she entered the room. Initially, she was still a little worried about the 2 little guys. They were unfamiliar with the place, so it was inevitable that she would be worried. Although she had gotten rid of the 3 huge light bulbs, there was only the 2 of them left, and she felt empty around them. Perhaps it was because they were not used to being alone for a while. However, after a short psychological battle, Yin Shishir thought that although the 2 little guys were a little mischievous, there should be nothing to worry about with Gong Jie around. The hotel they booked was a water house. As the name suggested, it was a hotel where there was seawater outside. The hotel Muyaja booked was a super luxurious 7-star hotel. It had more than 300 square meters of space, a living room, a garden, a balcony, and so on. Everything was available. What was even more shocking was that in such a hotel, when one pushed open the balcony door, there was a long wooden corridor. At the end, there was an escalator that led straight to the seawater. Sitting on the escalator, stepping on the seawater, and basking in the sun was definitely an incomparably comfortable experience. This was going to be a perfect island vacation. She was looking forward to it. There were no tourist attractions on the island, nor were there any bustling tourists. In their free time, they could step on the fine white sand or go into the seawater to swim with the fish. When they were tired, they could go to a spa to relax. When they were hungry, they could sit on the balcony and enjoy a seafood feast while facing the sea breeze. When she woke up in the morning, the first thing she saw was the person she loved the most. The second thing she saw was the endless blue sea outside the window. This was probably her most beautiful fantasy about the Maldives. However, this vacation would probably cost a lot of money. If it were in the past, Yin Shishir would definitely not be worried about such a huge expenditure. However, this man had just stepped down from his position as the head of the family. She vaguely heard that after handing over the power of the Mu Corporation, the accounts were tight. She did not know if this vacation would cost a lot of money. With such concerns, she took advantage of the fact that there were only the two of them and pulled him aside to ask, "This vacation in the Maldives should cost a lot, right?" Muyaja turned around and glanced at her. He smirked and said, "You don't have to worry about that. You just have to think about how to enjoy your vacation. That's enough." "Why not?" Yin Shishir smiled disapprovingly. "We're already husband and wife. We shouldn't hide anything from each other. Actually, my dream holiday destination is the Maldives. I didn't expect you to have already arranged this holiday for me. But I heard that you've been tight on money recently. I heard from Jinyu that you've invested some assets outside. After leaving the Mu Group, you still have some businesses under your name. If you want to operate these businesses, you'll definitely need a huge capital chain. But since you've severed all ties with Mu Group, your finances must be tight. I'm just worried. Don't let these meaningless expenses drag you down." "What do you mean by meaningless expenses?" Muyaja smiled helplessly and turned around to hug her gently. He kissed her on the forehead and said, "After we got married, other than the engagement ceremony, it seems like we haven't spent time together for a long time." When the man said this, Yin Shishir immediately blushed. She lowered her eyes and softly said, Chapter 2287. Despite what he said, she could not help but worry. "But we have so much time together in the future. We can enjoy our vacation anytime, not at this critical juncture. How can I enjoy it in peace if it affects your development?" Muyaja could not help but laugh. This was probably why this little woman was both adorable and hateful. She was always thinking of him. Perhaps it was because she had been living a hard life for too long. She had always been diligent and thrifty, so it was inevitable that she felt that going on a luxurious trip would be extravagant and wasteful. But in reality, she did not have to worry about this at all. You don't have to worry about the expenses of this trip at all. As for what you're worried about, the truth is that there were some problems with the capital chain some time ago, but it's all under my control. I've already calculated that leaving the Muse will bring about a series of difficulties, but I've already expected it, so I've made arrangements in advance. Song Enya was one of the most important links. Song Zhenghua had already agreed to allocate the land in Enchanting. In less than 2 days, the signing ceremony would be held. With this piece of land, coupled with a new round of financing after the 15th day of the first lunar month, the capital chain should recover. Yin Shishir probably did not expect that this man had already planned everything ahead of time, so it was inevitable that she had many doubts. Yin Shishir kissed him and rebuked. "I'm just worried." He smiled. "I know, but since we're here, let's just enjoy it without any distractions. There's no point in worrying about anything else. It's better to enjoy this vacation wholeheartedly